We're live. Good afternoon, Chair Halova, Vice Chair Lilac, commissioners, invited guests, members of the public and staff. Thank you for joining us in Portland for the Land Conservation and Development Commission's July meeting. My name is Jan Guerrero, and I'll review a few things to note and participation best practices. Recordings of the commission's meetings are available on YouTube. For individuals here in Portland with us who wish to testify, please complete a green comment registration card available on the materials table and hand it to Cindy. For those individuals joining us virtually, please use the public comment sign-up form on our website. Zoom participants, please rename yourselves with first and last name so that we can identify you and bring you forward at your opportunity to speak. Zoom participants will be in listen-only mode until called on to testify. And if you're with us in person, we ask that you please keep your cell phone silenced or on vibrate. Chair Halova, the meeting is yours.
Welcome everyone to our July LCDC meeting. I want to call this meeting to order, and starting off with that, Jan, can you please call the roll?
Chair Halova?
Yes.
Vice Chair Lilac? Vice Chair Lilac has an excused absence. Commissioner Warren?
Here.
Commissioner Boyer has an excused absence. Commissioner Sandoval has an excused absence.
Oh, I'm here. It's
I'm sorry, Commissioner Sandoval.
okay.
Commissioner Lasso has an excused absence. He won't be joining us until about 2:45.
And Jan, I don't know if you mentioned Commissioner Katie Jacobson has stepped off the commission, and so we're working with the governor's office to fill her vacancy. And so, sorry, I'm back to virtual world where I haven't been in a while. I'm looking for faces that I don't see. We are here in Portland for our commission hearing for the next 3 days, hosted by the City of Portland Planning Bureau. And so I just wanted to do a reminder for the commissioners who are here that please remember to complete your agenda scorecard before you leave the meeting tomorrow, not tomorrow, Friday. Your feedback is very helpful to the staff. And so with that, I know we are going to read our land acknowledgement, which I'm going to get that up on the slide. And I was hoping that maybe Commissioner Warren, are you able to read through the land acknowledgement?
Happy to. Put the full one up on the screen. No. Indigenous tribes and bands have been with the lands that we inhabit today throughout Oregon and the Northwest since time immemorial and continue to be a vibrant part of Oregon today. We would like to express our respect to the first peoples of this land, the 9 federally recognized tribes of Oregon: Burns Paiute Tribe, Confederated Tribe of Coos, Lower Umpqua and Siuslaw Indians, Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians, Confederated Tribes of Umatilla Indians Reservation, Confederated Tribes of the Warm Springs Reservations, Coquel Indian Tribe, Cow Creek Band of Umpqua Tribe of Indians, and the Klamath Tribes. It is important that we recognize and honor the ongoing legal and spiritual relationship between the land, plants, animals, and people indigenous to this place we now call Oregon.
Thank you. Oh, there is more.
The interconnectedness of the people, the land, and the natural environment cannot be overstated. The health of one is necessary for the health of all. We recognize the pre-existing and continued sovereignty of the 9 federally recognized tribes who have ties to this place and thank them for continuing to share their traditional ecological knowledge and perspective on how we might care for one another and the land so that it can take care of us. We commit to engaging in a respectful and successful partnership as stewards of these lands, and we are obliged by state law and policy We will uphold government to government relations to advance strong governance outcomes supportive of tribal self-determination and sovereignty.
Thank you. And so with that, we're going to have approval of the agenda. I was wondering if anyone has any modifications to the agenda from the commissioners. Any modifications? Okay, if not, Director Bateman, did you have anything that you wanted to modify?
Thank you, Chair. No modifications. Just a reminder to folks, if some of the items run early, we'll take items earlier and move them up on the agenda. So we have a lot going on over the next 2.5 days. We may move things a bit early if that's how our schedule runs.
Thank you. And so as a reminder, this commission hearing we have it's a 2.5 day meeting, which includes a bus tour that will leave at 8 a.m. Tomorrow morning. And so commissioners and staff, please gather at 7:30 a.m. So that we can get on that tour. And I wanted to also remind everyone that we have executive session is scheduled for Friday morning at 8:20 a.m. And so with that, we are going to introduce the commissioners who are, say their name and then their region of representation. And then we'll ask the DLCD staff and invited guests to introduce themselves. So let me start off with the commissioners, just, stating your name and your area of representation. And so I'm the Chair, Halova is my name, and I'm representing the Portland region, Portland Metro. Maybe let's start with Commissioner Sandoval.
Yeah, hi, Gerard Sandoval, and I represent the Willamette Valley. Thank you.
I'm Stuart Warren. I represent Southern Oregon.
And then if I'm correct, did we say, we know that Vice Chair Lelak is going to be joining us within minutes. Might be here already, just making sure he's, and then Commissioner Boyer could somebody recap, she's out till a certain time today, or just wanted to make sure.
Commissioner Boyer has an excused absence today.
Okay, but she'll be joining us the next 2 days?
Yes.
Okay, and also Commissioner Lazo, who represents the Portland region, also will be joining us later today.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And so I wanted to ask if the DLCD staff and invited guests, I think the folks in the room can see who's there, could introduce themselves.
Thank you, Chair. I'll start. We'll go around the table, and then maybe folks could be prepared to come up to the mic so that folks can hear us. We've got 7 folks in the audience. Good afternoon, everybody. Brenda Bateman, Director of the Department. Deputy.
Good afternoon, Kirsten Green, Deputy Director.
Good afternoon, Jan Guerrero, Executive Assistant to the Director and Commission Assistant.
Hello, everybody. David Michael, Information Resources Specialist, support for the Commission, audiovisual.
Good afternoon, Taylor Sorgenfree, HR Manager for the Department of Land Conservation and Development.
Good afternoon, Amy Metler, Chief Financial Officer for the Department of Land Conservation and Development.
Hello, Amanda Punton, Natural Resource Specialist for DLCD.
Sadie Carney, Policy Analyst and Communications Manager.
Rochelle Corbo, Budget Officer, DLCD.
Cindy Smith, Executive Support for the Director's Office with the department.
And I'm Steve Shipsey, and I'm counsel to the Commission.
Nice. Thank you for those intros. And so with that, I'm going to turn over the next agenda item to Director Bateman to talk about the Director's Report, which will provide an update on recent matters concerning the department. So I got a note that I have the ability to come over to the physical meeting and join you there because I somehow missed that memo. The question is, I can stay connected during that time but I don't know protocol wise whether I want to turn over the meeting to Commissioner Warren during my transit in case I get cut off for any reason. What would be the best practices?
That would be appropriate, Chair.
Okay, so I'm going to turn over the meeting to Commissioner Warren, but I will be listening on the phone and then see you in real life shortly. Thank you. And then I've just left Commissioner Warren being like, what? There's nothing you need to do. I think Director Bateman will begin her director's report. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Chair. Thanks everyone for the flexibility. There are currently 4 of us sitting here at the dais. I'm waving. You can see us on camera. And so we're looking forward to having the chair join us as well. We wanted to take just a few minutes this afternoon with the director's report to provide some updates and do a little bit of celebrating. Before I dive into the detail there, I did want to note, as I did in the last meeting, that for folks in the room, there are QR codes available to access meeting materials with your smartphone or your tablets, so that if you are trying to cut down on your paper consumption, you can actually pull this meeting agenda and its materials up rather quickly and follow along with us. And just another note before we really dive into the details, spoiler alert, we'll be asking a little bit further down in this agenda item for any public comment that folks may have with regard to the criteria that we are formulating for use in the director's evaluation this fall. So today's meeting will be focused on the criteria only, and we'll be talking about that a little bit when we get to that part in the agenda. We'll pause and see if we've received any public comment, if folks want to weigh in on how that evaluation is conducted. So get your comment forms ready. We'll be there in a few minutes. In the meantime, we have quite a few things to celebrate, and that is the arrival of new staff here at the department and also a series of promotions. So this is a combination of, just natural attrition and turnover and filling those items, but we also received quite a few positions from the Oregon legislature during their 2023 session, 13 new positions in all. And so for some of these, we've started filling at the senior levels. Some of those were promotions, which then created vacancies underneath. And so there's been a little bit of a domino effect. And we just wanted to note for the commission this afternoon who some of those names are. Some people have already joined our staff and are with us online or in the room today. So I wanted to provide just a few minutes for folks to introduce themselves. Let's see, I think I will start with folks who are here in the room. And Kirsten, I think I'll turn to you because most of these staff fall under your purview.
Director, Chair Warren, in transit, regular Chair Halova, members of the commission, thank you. Kirsten Green here, Deputy Director, and just wanted to welcome Amy Metler to our agency. Amy is our Chief Financial Officer and has some years of experience as auditor with the state of Oregon. She's took a turn out. Go ahead and take a seat because you may be invited to say a few words. She took a tour with Washington County and to our benefit decided to come back home to the state as CFO. So deep background in accounting and auditing, and really just a delightful human being. Amy, thanks for joining us. Would you like to say a few words?
Thank you so much. I am very excited to be joining your organization and a little closer to the microphone. I'm very happy to be here. My background in accounting and housing, I think, are going to serve your agency very well. And I'm very excited to join your mission. Very pleased to be amongst your staff. I find them very welcoming and very professional. So thank you all so much.
We have one other member of the management team I'd like to introduce, in absentia. Percival de Oliveira has joined us as Chief Information Officer, DLCD's first. An act of the legislature made that happen, and good work by Ms. Taylor Sorgenfree helping us recruit. But Percival comes actually from the private sector. He's in mandatory training all day, as is another manager I'll mention in a moment. One of the governor's new priorities is that managers go into management training right away. I think they're enrolled within 5 business days of being employed with the state. So they're in mandatory all-day training today and will be joining the commission in the upcoming days. But Percival comes with 17 years of IT experience, again, in the private sector. He and Amy, both learning all things DLCD very quickly. He's currently developing an IT strategic plan and look forward to meeting with you all at his tomorrow when he's here in person. Should I continue to Ethan Stuckmeyer? It's a little sort of out of order, but a promotion. Ethan Stuckmeyer has been with the agency since 2019 and is also in training today, but he's been promoted as the new housing division manager. Previously, Ethan worked for Oregon Housing Community Services as well, and then rotated into over to DLCD to take the position to lead the implementation of House Bills 2001 and 2003 after the 2019 session. Done a fantastic job with his team, competitively competed for, and then was promoted to the new division manager. So he's learning all things managerial and continuing with the rulemaking this year. Shall we let Taylor introduce Kevin? Taylor, would you like to come on up?
Commissioner Hlova, Commissioner Warren, members of the commission, Taylor Sorgan-Free, HR manager for the department. It is my honor and thrill to introduce Kevin Blanton, who joined our agency July 10th. Kevin has several years of state experience, including HR experience in roles at ODHS, ODOT, and most recently with Business Oregon. He has experience in recruitment, class comp, special leaves, and brings a well-rounded experience to our agency. He has hit the ground running from day one, and just so thrilled that he's joined our team. So I would like to introduce Kevin, who's joining us virtually. Kevin, please feel free to say hello and a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Vice Chair Hlova, Commissioner, Warren, and members of the commission. My name is Kevin Blanton. I am, as Taylor said, the other person in HR. I'm excited to be here. And just real quick, I'm going to throw this out here because I was told this is a good little story. I'm very familiar with this agency as my father had worked for this agency for 33 years, something like that. We'll just say 30 plus years. Looks like some of you might know him, Dale Blanton, just to put it out there. So I am his son. So I'm very familiar with the agency. I'm very excited to be here and support the mission and support the staff of this agency as well as the commission itself. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. Shall I continue? Okay, thanks. There's just with all the managers in training, I get a big load today. So I would like to just announce and celebrate the promotion of Mari Valencia Aguilar. And I'm not sure if Mari's on the phone. She might be busy doing housing work with the governor's new priorities, but Mari also competed and was successful in replacing Ethan as senior planner of housing programs. So Mari's been with DLCD about 2 years after serving on the climate friendly and equitable communities rulemaking task force, but also about a decade of work in community development, community engagement, and also had previously worked for Washington County in a manager of their housing programs, which you'll hear a lot about later, the connection of federal and state policy and housing. So a real asset to our agency. I might then turn to Madeline Phillips, Miss Maddie Phillips, if you'd like to come on camera. You guys are welcome to. Kieran, Megan, Scott, you're all going to be up soon. So feel free to come on camera. Good to see you, Maddie. Maddie, successfully, I haven't had a chance to congratulate you personally, Maddie. So congratulations. And we're so excited that I think just earlier this week, late last week, you accepted the position of infrastructure specialist and a planner with the housing team. Maddie joined DLCD after some years in community development work in Coburg and has been leading the Rural Transportation Equity Project. Maddie, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you, Deputy Director Green, Chair Hlova, and also Chair Warren at this moment, Director Bateman. It's a pleasure to be with you this afternoon virtually, but I look forward to seeing you on Friday when I'll be there in person. But thank you again. I'm incredibly pleased to be continuing my work with DLCD and have an opportunity to continue the good work of the department related to housing. You'll see that, like the work that I've done with the Rural Transportation Equity Program, I'm eager to roll up my sleeves and get to work building and catalyzing opportunities for housing related to infrastructure development throughout the state. So just looking forward to continuing that work and staying with our team here.
Awesome. Thank you, Maddie. And it's just such a good segue. I can't resist to next introduce Scott Sloop, who's an intern who Maddie and Matt somehow found at the Claremont McKenna College had a sort of summer internship program. So thank you, CMC College, for funding Scott's summer internship, which will help us advance Maddie's work in rural transportation planning and community engagement. Scott, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon, Commission. Thank you. I'm very excited to be working with DLCD through mid-August. So for the next few weeks, helping Maddie develop a toolkit for rural communities to better use limited resources to conduct community engagement. So I'm excited to be here. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much. And then we have two other luminaries, Megan Tuck and Kieran Turnbull, who are helping from the RARE program, Resource Assistance for Rural Environments at the University of Oregon. Their title just isn't quite good enough, but it's a mass timber coordinator. I keep wanting to elevate you, but coordination's what makes the world go round. So thank you both for accepting this position to help us coordinate the work of DLCD share of a $41.4 million grant made to the state of Oregon to accelerate housing using mass timber, and DLCD share of that is $500,000, the bulk of which will be going into communities for direct grant assistance. And Megan and Kieran have been helping us coordinate all that work just as recently yesterday as a webinar. Megan, would you like to greet the commission, say a few words about yourself and where you're going next, and then we'll turn to Kieran.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Director Green, Director Bateman, and Chairs Warren and Halova. It's really great to be here today. This work has been really amazing, starting with DLCD and the burgeoning industry of mass timber. I feel very lucky to be a part of the start of this project, and I can't wait to see how it takes off in the future. I will be working with the RARE program starting in September, but I will be moving over to Bend and working with Central Oregon Intergovernmental Council as a rural resource coordinator. So I'm very happy for my time here this summer and will be sad to leave you all, but I'm sure I'll see most of your faces in the future sometime.
So stay in touch, Megan. Kieran.
Yeah, hello, members of the commission and department. My name is Kieran. I and Megan recently graduated from the University of Oregon, and this has been a fantastic first stepping stone just to continue my education and also make great connections through the department. So I really appreciate you all. I will be continuing doing the RARE program and being part of DLCD for the next year, continuing helping coordinate the code adoptions and also communicating with the rural communities. So really appreciate everyone and I really appreciate this opportunity.
And thank you. So Kieran will be helping resource constrained communities adopt mass timber friendly codes all around Oregon. So he's coming to a planning commission or city council near you. Watch for those announcements on those 10 selected communities, but really great interest in the webinars Megan and Kieran have been hosting over the last few days. And then finally, thanks, Kieran. And then finally, I would just announce the promotion, the retention of Ms. Ingrid Caudell, the department. She recently interviewed for and was selected to be an administrative services professional too. Do I have that title right? Thank you. She is basically invaluable to the housing team and to the agency for helping keep us coordinated with our Rules Advisory Committee meetings and public records. So wanted to just breathe a sigh of relief that the legislature delivered us the resources to retain Ingrid, and want to thank her for her long service now to DLCD. Oh, thank you. And then Trisha Patterson in absentia. So Mr. Kroll will be joining us, I think, in the next 2 days. But Matt has hired Trisha Patterson, who is joining the team for the Natural Hazard Management Plan Risk Assessment Team. So all over the state, DLCD helps local governments with natural hazard mitigation plans and community planning. And Trisha was just recently hired as a full-time permanent employee to join that team. So I want to welcome Trisha to the team as well. Thank you, Director. Thanks, Commissioners. Thank you, team.
Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Director. That was quite the roster of folks. And staff, you're welcome to stay on if you like, or drop back off and watch us through another channel. But welcome all of you to the department, and congratulations to all of you. Commissioners, as you can see, we've had quite a bit of movement, and we will continue to as we continue our hiring and go right into a legislative session next February. So with that, we have decided to, as a permanent practice, attach an organizational chart to the back of this report for you. You'll see it as attachment A. Many more people, and we're going to have to go to 2 pages. So it's there, it's packed. We've got as much on there as we can right at the moment. And so that's just there for your reference. And as you meet people, if you kind of want to see where they've landed in the agency, what team they're part of, that's there for your reference. Please let us know if you have any questions or if we've miscategorized anyone. I also just want to pause here and note that Vice Chair Lilac has joined us remotely. Good afternoon. And that Commissioner Sandoval has a hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to congratulate the department. I mean, it's just the growth and capacity is just is super amazing. I see the same thing happening in the Oregon Housing Oregon Housing Agency as well. And so I think these next few years are going to be extremely important, and I think we're going to see a lot of growth around affordable housing and increased infrastructure throughout the state. And I also like to see that a lot of the new hires are from the University of Oregon, so they're very well trained.
Excellent. Thank you for that note, Commissioner, because it's true. We have received quite a bit of our growth from the governor's priorities, but you'll note that we also have much of the support, much of the business services that are required to make an agency run smoothly and correctly. And so we have some of those resources in that capacity coming on board as well, for which we're very grateful.
Director Bateman?
Yes, Chair.
Sorry, I couldn't raise my hand because I'm driving. I was curious. I assumed this, but I just wanted to verify that all of the roles that we are going to have for this year are on that chart. That there's no missing roles, or are there more roles that need to be inserted into the org chart?
Oh, no, that's a great question. Thank you, Chair. Yes, if you, those of you who are not driving, want to move to your organizational chart as attachment A, you'll see quite a few of those slots are in red and they're marked as vacant. So we have accounted for everything that we received permission for from the 2023 legislative session. They are all on here. Many of them actually have already been filled, but several have not. And so they're still marked as red and vacant. But this accounts for everything that our agency is currently authorized to have in the way of personnel.
Thank you. And I also wanted to say a big appreciation, not only for the work and the new people and all the wonderful things, but also the ability to have a snapshot with the org chart. I think is super important for us. So thank you for doing that work.
Our pleasure, Chair. So if there are no further questions from commissioners, I'll continue to move on through the report. The next section that I wanted to draw to your attention is just a little comment about the 50th anniversary. Wanted to thank everybody, commissioners, partners, staff, and guests who were able to join us and who made our celebration on the Capitol Mall possible on May 24th. This is our first meeting that we've held since then. And so we just wanted to pause and take a moment to continue that celebration. We had 9 speakers led off by Governor Kotek, who arrived as a surprise and actually kicked off the event for us with well-crafted comments, but no paper in front of her. She just spoke to the crowd and it was fantastic. We had, as part of that event, food vendors, live music, a poster gallery, lots of giveaways, and we had framed the original Senate Bill 100 and had it out on the table for the audience to be able to see and kind of visit with. So that was very special. We also wanted to note that the 50th anniversary survey that we've put on our website is still there today. It's on our homepage, and we will leave that up, as we've mentioned before, until the end of the summer. And then we will plan to bring all of the results and themes and threads that we've seen in those survey results to the commission in their November meeting. And as you'll recall, we asked a couple of questions in terms of what should we be celebrating? What are some successes that you think we should be highlighting, as well as what work remains, what challenges remain in front of us, and what should we be paying attention to as we move forward into our next 50 years. So that survey will be open for just a little bit longer for folks. There was as part of our 50th anniversary celebration, a video that Sheep Scott Creative, who was our event consultant, put together for us with clips from the day. And I just want to check with staff and see if that's ready to roll, ready to rock and roll. Okay, we'll see what happens on the screen. Ready to rock and roll? Okay, we'll see what happens on the screen.
When we think about who we are and what
Okay,
the
we'll
state
see what
that we
happens on the
love
screen.
should be, we think about our land use system, that we will protect our farmland and our forests and all those beautiful places that mean so much to us. To celebrate when we think about
see what happens on the
anniversary
screen.
and what
Okay,
the
we'll
state
see what
that is a
happens on the
milestone
screen.
for us as we think about our land use system, that we will protect our farmland and our forests and all those beautiful places that mean so much to us. To celebrate when we think about anniversary and what the state that is a milestone for us as we think about our land use system, that we will protect our farmland and our forests and all those beautiful places that mean so much to us. To celebrate when we think about anniversary and what the state that is a milestone for us as we think about our land use system, that we will protect our farmland and our forests.
We still have so much to learn from each other. So many more opportunities.
Celebrate when we think about anniversary and what the state that is a milestone for us as we think about our land use system, that we will protect our farmland and our forests.
We still have so much to learn from each other. So many more opportunities.
Thank you, Brenda. Think about it. It's an honor to be one of the states that is a milestone.
Thank you. I've never been on a loop. I've never been on a loop like that before. That was awesome. Well, and what I love was just over and over in the background, our farms and our forest land, our farms and our forest land. Thank you so much, everybody. We had an incredible amount of product that came out of this, from incredible pictures and video to original music, original poetry. The whole day was very emotional, which I was not prepared for. And it was a joy to be part of that celebration. So thank you. Is it available on our website? Yes, please, Miss Sadie Carney, our Director of Communications, who had a lot to do with our 50th anniversary.
Thank you, Director Bateman. For the record, Sadie Carney, Communications Manager and Policy Analyst. Yes, that video is available on our website. And if you go to the DLCD YouTube channel, you can see a playlist that includes all of the speakers from the 50th event, and it is well worth watching. So please visit it. And yeah, it's easy to access through our website, that one. So thank you.
Very good. Thank you. And just a note of thanks that I have to keep repeating. Thanks to Deputy Director Kirsten Green. Thinking ahead, we had a VIP section ready to go for folks who arrived at the event, including Nancy Fadley and Ann Squire and other luminaries of Senate Bill 100 era and implementation. So thank you. Let's see, next on the report, I wanted to just make a mention. It's really just informational because at this point, I think our window of application has closed, but I wanted to note that we currently have 3 vacancies on the commission. I will not take it personally. And so as we noted at the beginning of the meeting, Commissioner Katie Jacobson from Lincoln City, or from our coastal representation, has stepped off the committee due to her other duties. And so that vacancy we've been aware of for quite some time, and are working on filling that. The second announcement that we have is Commissioner Sandoval, who's here with us today and will continue with us through our next meeting, but his first term ends at the end of November, and he's decided not to stand for a second term, which makes me very sad personally. But he is doing great things at the university and wanted to make sure he's got his time dedicated in that direction. So Commissioner, I wanted to thank you here, and we'll continue to thank you for the next few meetings for your service and for your input and your passion for housing in particular in this space. Wondered if you just wanted to say a few words and then we'll move on.
I mean, the key reason why I decided not to do a second term, it was a hard decision, is I think really my contribution as an academic. And so I see it like all of my former students, that now work at the agency, and then with the research that I do. And so it was a hard decision, but I think that my heart is really as an academic, and I need to kind of focus on that.
Very good. Thank you, Commissioner. Our third vacancy that we have is geographically the seat that represents Jackson and Josephine counties, and that portion of Douglas County laying east of the summit of the Coast Range. And that is currently occupied by Commissioner Stuart Warren. Commissioner Warren, would you like to tell us what you're thinking?
Well, I've had a lot of life changes and have recently established myself in Eugene, Oregon. So I am hoping to be promoted to a different seat, taking over for Commissioner Sandoval. But we are waiting to hear back from the governor's office and the Senate committee.
Very good.
Fingers
Thank
crossed.
you. Thank you. And that was as of graduation in June, right? That news all came together. So the process is that we have asked for applications from these 3 geographies. 2 of those must be an elected county commissioner. One must be an elected county commissioner, and another must be an elected city official. So we know that 2 of the 3 slots must be current elected officials. And the process is that the next window for confirmation, Senate confirmation, is in September. So we've asked for applications. We're in a process right now in discussions with the governor's office. It's the governor that actually makes the appointment and forwards those nominations into the Senate Rules Committee. And that's where the final confirmation will take place in September. So we're quite a bit away in time from having some certainty as to how these slots will be filled. But that's generally the process that we're in right now. I just wanted to make sure folks were aware of the kind of moving the seats around.
And sorry, I missed the exact dates. What is the first hearing, which we would imagine the new commissioners being a part of?
Let's see. Well, there are a couple of different things going on. For instance, with Commissioner Sandoval, the term doesn't actually end until the end of November. So it would be the meeting after that in 2024 where we'd start to see a new commissioner. However, with the case of Commissioner Jacobson, who has already stepped down, any action that's taken in September could be effective immediately, and we could see a new person in that chair in the November meeting. So we'll have a couple different timeframes going on there.
Thank you.
Not sure it matters, but the city official doesn't have to be a current city official. The county does have to be current, but the city doesn't have.
Okay. The wording is strange. I think you're correct. Very good. Thank you. No, that was helpful. Let's see. I'm just scanning for raised hands or other comments. Okay. The next piece of the report is just a light.
Sorry, can I ask a clarifying question just because we're all here?
Yes.
If that's the case, that it doesn't have to be a current city official, it's my understanding that Commissioner Warren used to be a city official. Is that correct?
That's correct. Good data point. That's excellent, Chair.
Okay, thanks.
Good. Others? Okay. Very good. All right, I shall move on. The next piece of the report is just a very light informational check-in on the governor's expectations. And so I just wanted to remind everyone that when Governor Kotek took office at the beginning of this calendar year, immediately she submitted a list of expectations to agency directors, asked us to sign a letter acknowledging that we'd received them, and then put into place some staff over at Department of Administrative Services to help us with these expectations. But in essence, there are 11 required reports that we need to send forward to the governor's office at various points throughout this calendar year. And I will say it was a joy to join this agency where much of that work was already underway, or we already had a culture of putting these reports and plans together. So we've been able to pivot pretty easily and pretty well to fulfilling these requirements. Some other agencies have never put together plans or reports like this before and are struggling mightily. So I'm very proud of our staff. And just as by way of example, some of the things that the governor is looking for is, and we've been talking about this all along, a DEI plan, a strategic plan, now an IT strategic plan. These are all things that we've done before, that we have history around, and that we were well in process of putting together. Some other things that she'd like to see is agency hiring process, and particularly filling vacancies with speed. Developing new employees and managers. Deputy Director mentioned a moment ago, we've got a new requirement for managers as soon as they join us to go straight into management training and to hear what kinds of standards and practices Department of Administrative Services and the governor would like to see from each manager. So we're already up and running with those. Another is providing quarterly performance feedback for employees. We are actually in the middle of doing that right now, and have already, for our agency, reached more than 90% success rate for this quarter, and those feedback loops, those feedback meetings. She'd also like to see a continuity of operations plan, some survey of measuring employee satisfaction, and let's see, what else do we have? Succession planning. So these are some examples of the things that she's looking for, data and metrics. And we are putting those together now. We expect to meet all of those deadlines throughout late summer, fall, and end of year rather easily. One of the other things that she's looking for.
I had a question. Sorry, because I'm in the car. I can't tell if it's the right time to ask.
It is.
Thank you. I was curious if we'd ever done an employee satisfaction before or recently. I was just curious.
I don't think so, Chair. I know some other agencies have, but we have not here at DLCD. And I do believe that there will be some kind of template forthcoming that we can use if we want to pick it up and use it, so we don't have to create it from scratch ourselves. Department of Administrative Services has actually brought on staff specifically to develop some of these templates and suggestions for agencies, so that they don't have to make things up as they go, and also so that there's some standardization and comparability between agencies.
That sounds great. Thank you.
Sure. One of the other items that the governor has asked for as part of this list is a review of the agency director. And so this is our segue into the next part of the report. That's one of the items that this agency and commission already have a history with. And we were midway through this conversation already. And so it all dovetails quite nicely. This commission has a policy of reviewing the agency director every year. So every other year, it's just the commission doing the review. And then on the offset years, it's more of a 360. That is asking for input and information from staff, from stakeholders and partners, and casting the net more widely. So one thing that I wanted to note as part of the governor's expectations is a new timeline for all agencies to comply with this, which didn't match exactly with the timeline we were on. So we'll have to reset just a bit. And what that means is that this commission will provide an evaluation this fall, and then they'll provide one again a year from that. And then after that, we'll be on a good timetable using a template that the Department of Administrative Services has provided, so that we can jump in and start doing 360 reviews every other year. So we had to do a little skip step there, but we'll be caught up and online with the rest of the agencies here shortly. So this is the part of the agenda item that I had warned you about previously. We are looking at the questions that you as a commission have already seen in a previous meeting. You provided a little bit of feedback as to how you might like to adjust some of the questions. And then we have a rating system from 1 to 5. And so I'm not going to read all of the questions out loud here, but generally they fall in categories that are high level. They're looking at the executive performance of the director here at the department, and they cover things like how is the leadership with regard to a strategic plan, staff relations, external relations, meaning local government, and legislative relations. How is the department and the executive doing with regard to public participation and communication, budget development and execution, and then implementation, not just planning, but execution as well. So I did want to note, stop here and pause and note that our HR manager, Taylor Sorgenfree, will actually be leading up this effort. And when we get to the actual evaluation, she'll be leading that process. I will not be leading that process. And so, Taylor, I wondered if you had just a few words you wanted to say, or see if there were any questions from the commissioners for Taylor as we move into the actual process this fall.
Chair Hlova, Chair Warren, members of the commission, and Vice Chair Lilac. Nice to see you. Members of the commission, Taylor Sorgenfree, HR Manager for the Department of Land Conservation and Development. As Director Bateman has said, we will be doing the actual evaluation process in the fall at our November commission meeting. That will occur in executive session. But today, I think we're taking public comment on the criteria only, and I will be facilitating that discussion in our fall November commission meeting. And I'm happy to take any questions. Commissioner Lilac.
Hi, Taylor. I had the pleasure of participating in the director's evaluation, 2.5 years ago. And so I have had some experience with it. My question is, will you be reaching out to us to begin that process as early as August and September so that we have an informed discussion in November, or will it occur just verbally by evaluating a score sheet or whatever we have here at that meeting?
Chair Hlova, Chair Warren, Vice Chair Lilac, thank you for the question. So as soon as we finalize criteria, I can consolidate that into a survey type feedback and can provide it to the commission. And that can be circulated as soon as this meeting concludes and we have the finalized criteria.
I'll just a follow up. I just recalled former Chair MacArthur and I met a couple of times, and with the HR. Taylor, I'm sorry, I don't recall if you were with the department at that point or not. And we met to go through the evaluation and then prepare for the evaluation and executive session. So I'm open. However works best for you and for the evaluation process. I'm available.
Wonderful. Thank you. And I think there'll be a couple of connection points at the initiation of the survey and feedback once the information is compiled in preparation for the November meeting. Director Bateman.
Thank you, Taylor. I just wanted to make a note here. Thank you for the reminder, Vice Chair. We'll be getting a little bit later in the meeting to a matrix of all of the commissioners' responsibilities. And one of those lines is a subcommittee for director evaluation, for which the chair and the vice chair are currently, they have check marks by their name. So when you're ready to start that process, I think those will be the first two folks that'll be included in the discussion.
Did we want to pause here for public comment?
Yes. Jan, do we have any indication of public comment in the room or online for this item?
No public comment at this time.
Okay. Good. So I think council says we don't need a formal vote. I think we'll just see if anybody has any burning questions, if any commissioners have any particular heartburn, or if we should move forward with the questions and scoring rating scale as is. Take the silence to be an affirmation. Okay. Thank you, Taylor. This is great. Excellent. Moving on. The next piece that I'd like to highlight in our report, I'm going to skip ahead a couple pages because we actually have a presentation from our Community Services Manager, Gordon Howard. I see that he's on the line, and we specifically wanted to bring to the commission today the 2023-25 grants allocation plan to see how that's going, who's been involved, and what next steps look like for our grant program. Gordon. Hello.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Bateman, Chair Hlova, Vice Chair Lilac, Commission. The grants allocation plan is required by state law, a state statute to actually the grants allocation plan is not required, but we are required to have a committee to review a draft grants allocation plan, provide us input, and then the department prepares a grants allocation plan. This is for our technical assistance grant program, which has been the kind of the baseline technical assistance program for local governments and other similar entities such as tribal governments and other perhaps councils of governments and things like that. It's to provide assistance to local governments on their planning projects. And the grants allocation plan that was developed and then reviewed by the committee with some minor amendments sets forth how we would allocate the money appropriated by the legislature. The legislature appropriated $1.78 million for our technical assistance grant fund for the coming biennium. This is about an $80,000 increase over the previous biennium, so it's more or less the same, about 4 or 5% increase. It's still significantly lower than the grant program was prior to going back into some more and more distant history, the 2009 recession, when the legislature significantly cut the program and has never fully recovered. The grant allocation plan also is required. The legislature requires the first priority for expenditures out of that fund to be the population forecasting program from Portland State University Population Research Center. And that is the biggest single amount of grants from the fund. Although now that the Population Research Center is doing a lot of work, we're able to transfer some of that obligation to the housing funds that the legislature has appropriated, since it's going directly to help local governments with their housing work. After that, we have grants generally to the 3 counties of the Columbia Gorge Commission within the Columbia National Scenic Area, and to help them administer their requirements under the National Scenic Area Act. That's been a program that's been in place for about 20 years. We're proposing no change to the amount of those grants. Then we also have a small grant to Portland State University Dispute Resolution Center to help us to refer them to any disputes local governments have that could be resolved through mediation. It's a small grant, but it is used occasionally by local governments and other parties. And then the primary amount, and then we also have a grant program where it's called our Planning Assistance Grant Program. It's called the Grant Young Planning Assistance Program, named after a former now deceased regional representative from Eastern Oregon who really championed local governments, especially small cities such as populate a lot of them in Eastern Oregon. And we are, in the past, gave grants of $1,000 per very small city and $4,000 to small counties. And we decided this time to propose an increase. So that amount has not been increased in over 20 years. And so we would increase that amount to $2,000, offering to small cities under 2,500 population, and $5,000 to counties under 15,000 population. And that money has very few strings attached. It's only required to be used for planning activities, and the local government needs to report to us at the end of the biennium how they use the money. For what planning purpose. It could be a very simple thing in updating a zoning code. It could be to process a particularly controversial local quasi-judicial application. A lot of these cities that get the grants have no planning staff. The city clerk or recorder, or perhaps the mayor, is also the planner. And so this money is very much appreciated, and it's going to be, I think, appreciated that we are slightly able to increase that amount this biennium. Then the remainder of the amount, the total, about $800,000 goes into our general technical assistance grant program. And starting in October, starting in actually August, we put out a request for applications for planning assistance from that program. from that grant fund. We get them by October 1st. We make a decision on which of the many applications we receive, asking for much more money that is in the grant fund that we will be able to fund for the biennium. And then the last part I want to talk about is the criteria by which we review those applications, and those are set forth in the report. And we have five categories. It used to be that housing was the number one priority. And now that housing has its own grant fund, we've removed that from this. We want to use this grant fund for all the planning activities that don't involve housing, of which there are many. And so our 5 categories are listed out in your materials, and number 1 being economic development, but also other matters, as you can see. We also, starting last biennium, require local governments to report how they are going to provide equitable and great engagement and consider equity and diversity and inclusion in terms of the outcomes of their grant programs. So we do require that, and we are, in working with the housing division, the newly established housing division, going to be able to provide services of a consultant on contract with the state to help local governments work on issues of providing more diverse engagement for their planning under these grants if they're granted, if they receive if their grant application is accepted, and also look at outcomes that promote diversity, equity, inclusion in their planning processes. And so I don't really have anything else to add at this point, unless you have any questions for me about our grant allocation plan for the coming biennium.
Oh, I'm here. Is this working? I'm like, who's going to ask the question? Oh, me. Welcome. I'm here. Does anybody, Vice Chair Lilac?
Thank you. Gordon, I really want to say how much I appreciate the increase in the allocation of resources for small cities and small local governments to provide the support. Just yesterday afternoon, at our local officials advisory committee meeting, we heard about that exact issue and how important it is, both the financial resources as well as the technical assistance. So certainly very, very welcome to hear an increase in that funding. Thank you.
Commissioner Sandoval?
Yeah, now that I'm leaving the commission, I could say more controversial things. So one of the things, I mean, okay, so a lot of the funding for this goes to PSU's Population Research Center, and for doing population projections. Now, when I was getting my master's degree, learn how to do population projections, pretty easy. It's not that complicated. So why not build that capacity into our own, agency and have our own staff do population projections? And it almost that also would give more accountability and legitimacy to those numbers. So I just want to get your thoughts on that.
Thank you, Chair Holova, Commissioner Sandoval. That's a very good question. Some history before 2013, population projections by state law were done by the counties, individual counties for this and for that county and the cities within the county, except for the Portland metro area. And there was some experience with counties either not doing them at all, some counties, or engaging in a very political process of allocating population among cities within that county. In 2013, and that became a subject of litigation for things like urban growth boundary expansions, is what a legitimate population forecast was. In 2013, the legislature decided that, and put this in statute, that the population forecast would be done by essentially, hopefully independent and non-biased professional demographers, and they looked to the Portland State University Population Research Center, which also already did some population forecasts for other matters for the state, to be the official designatee of doing those population forecasts, and they do them on a 4-year rotating basis for around the state. And the idea was to take it out of politics and the sometimes unreliability of the counties and have it done on a kind of a professional basis on a regular basis as well. Now, I think that's an interesting idea that instead of putting this out to Portland State, if the state developed that ability ourselves, I think that would take some discussion with the legislature to change the statutes to do that. Now, I would say also that we do occasionally get some dissatisfaction from local governments about the Portland State population projections. We try to work through those issues. Some of that dissatisfaction may be from, local political reasons, but there are also some questions occasionally about the amount of input that Portland State gets in doing the projections. And we do try to work with local governments to make sure that they do get input about their local planning processes and trends to Portland State. And when Portland State does get that information, we found that they've been pretty responsive about building those kind of unique local characteristics into their projections, which are otherwise based on a lot of demographic things that I certainly can't explain to you because I don't understand them at the level of detail necessary. So that's kind of an answer to your question, and it would be an interesting idea to have the state do that ourselves. I mean, as you're going to be hearing later tomorrow, we do, our Office of Economic Analysis does employment forecasts for the state. So we do have some abilities inside the state to do that. But that would take a discussion at the legislature to change the current system.
Okay, well, thank you. That was very, very clear. So I appreciate it.
And then Gordon, I had a follow-up question to that. Why do we categorize it then as a grant versus just a line item in our budget that is outsourced? I'm more curious about the designation of grant.
Well, Chair Holova, the reason we do that is the legislature told us to do that in a statute. They said the money for the Portland State Population Forecast Grant will come out of the Technical Assistance Fund from the legislature, and they also said it would be the first priority of that fund, and that's written in statute. We did in this last by recent legislative session have that language modified somewhat to say from the Technical Assistance Fund or other sources, because we recognized that there was, in fact, the amount of the Portland State Population Research Fund grant is going up from about $500,000 to $800,000 for this biennium, because they are being asked to do population forecasts for race and ethnicity and other demographic factors related to the housing work that they weren't required to do before. And so instead of further burdening the Technical Assistance Fund, that's why with this additional language, we can justify taking about half of that $800,000 out of the housing grants done by the legislature, because it's directly related to the housing work.
Thank you. Any other questions on the grant program? Yeah, I think you were continuing on. I think in your report.
I believe I am at the end of my prepared remarks on the director's report. The rest of the piece is our legal work that we'll perhaps touch on in executive session later this week, but I have nothing further. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. And I noticed in the agenda that it talked about public comment will be accepted on the director evaluations. I didn't know if that had already happened.
That already happened, and sadly there was none.
And I just want to make a comment why I'm so disoriented. I spent 6 years in this room when I was on the adjustments committee for the city of Portland. And so coming back here, just the reorientation of my brain. And this is really fancy compared to where we used to be. So I just thought it was a very interesting feeling to be here again. Thank you. So that concludes item number 2. We're going to move on to item number 3, which is the Integrated Water Resource Strategy Briefing with Amanda Punton and the Oregon Water Resource Department's Water Resource Specialist, Crystal Grinnell. Amanda will lead us off.
Hello, and thank you, Chair Holova and Vice Chair Lilac and Commissioners. For the record, my name is Amanda Punton. I'm the Natural Resource Specialist for DLCD. And I'm just going to introduce Crystal in this topic. So Crystal Grinnell comes to us from the Oregon Water Resources Department, where she is coordinating the 2023 update to the state's integrated water resource strategy. Since the first publication in 2012, the IWRS has recognized the intersection between land use planning and water resources. The IWRS covers access to source water, preservation of water quality, and the consequences of extreme weather events related to water, like too much water causing flooding, too little water resulting in increased wildfire risk. So DLCD staff have contributed to the previous 2 publications of the IWRS, but this time around it's a little different. DLCD has a larger role. So Hillary Foote, our farm forest specialist, and I are serving on the IWRS interagency project team for the 2023 report, which means we meet very frequently with Crystal, who updates us and gets input from us and the other people on the team for how the outreach is going, and we'll be moving into the drafting process for this next report. So DLCD is also involved with the Governor's Office directed Water Core team. And I mention that because the Water Core team uses the integrated water resource strategy to inform the prioritization of policies that are advanced through interagency coordination. So as you're aware, the intersection of water and land use has many tendrils. Crystal will highlight a few of those for you today. Know that this conversation about how our land use program might be reflected in the 2023 IWRS narrative and action items is ongoing, and that we welcome your contribution to this conversation at any time. So with that, I yield the floor to Crystal.
All right, thank you, Amanda. And I believe we're also going to have some slides presented. Is that correct from that end?
Yes.
Fantastic. Great. Okay. So for the record, I am Crystal Grinnell, the IWRS specialist with the Oregon Water Resources Department. So thank you for having me join you today. As Amanda mentioned, we are undertaking the update to this document. So I thought this was a great time to just meet with the commission here and talk through a little bit of background and just that process that we're going through for the update. So next slide, please. So here's just a quick agenda item. If folks aren't familiar with the IWRS, I will give a little bit of a background there. I'll talk through a little bit of the project timeline that we have for this update. And we have completed our public outreach and engagement component. So I'll give you some high level findings from that component of the project. And then we will go through just a few pieces of content of the IWRS to talk about how it's related to work at DLCD. And then there will be some time for questions and discussion at the end, but feel free to raise any questions as I go through the presentation as well. Next slide, please. So the background on the IWRS, the idea for needing an integrated water resources strategy at the state level came about in 2009. So that was a House bill and now is in statute. And an interesting piece about that, that law is that the Oregon Water Resources Department is the one to lead that development of the integrated water resources strategy. But it is not just purely a strategy for that department. It is really looking at how all of the agencies and public and private partnerships can work together on water, focusing on quality, quantity, and ecosystem needs. There are requirements also listed in statute about who should be consulted in the development of that. And then another piece that's important to note is that it is required to be updated every 5 years as it currently stands. Next slide, please. So a little background on how this document is used. So this document is used by different people for different reasons. It is a very useful place to go to for a high level background on water issues and solutions. There's also a lot of information in there regarding agency programs and how it relates to water, how agencies collaborate and work together. And then the final kind of component of that strategy boils down to recommended actions. And so there are 51 recommended actions, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in some next slides. But those recommended actions that are included in the strategy are very valuable for agencies to use when they're asking for funding or policy requests. And then another important piece to note is that the strategy directs agencies to create work plans. So once that strategy is developed and those recommended actions are updated, then it's up to the agencies to develop work plans and figure out how to get those recommended actions into their budgets and their work plans. Next slide, please. So this is not the first one that we've done. As I had mentioned that we're looking at the 2017 version, but there was one done in 2012. So from that time when the legislation was passed in 2009, it took 3 years of intense outreach and engagement to develop the first one. And I do want to mention that Director Bateman was the primary author on developing that. So we have some good background here in the room regarding the Integrated Water Resources Strategy. So that 5-year update did happen in 2017. The following 5-year update was a little late here. So here we are in 2023 now working on that third version. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to provide you with a timeline of what we're doing regarding our updating process. So the first half of the year has been spent doing the public outreach, so designing that public outreach and engagement. We worked with a consultant to help us do that, and we completed that effort at the end of June. And I'll talk a little bit more about what was included in that process there. And then at the summer, we're working on a draft Integrated Water Resources Strategy. We will put out the first version for public review and comment, hopefully in October, provide a second opportunity in January as well for review and comment. And then we're hoping to have a final version in early 2024. And the process there is that the Water Resources Commission is the commission that finally adopts that new update. Next slide, please. So a little bit about the process that I'm going through here in terms of engaging the state agencies and federal agencies. So we do have, this is part of what Amanda had mentioned, is that we have a state agency project team. And so in the past, there has been a similar version of this team where we have members from Department of Ag, DEQ, and Fish and Wildlife, along with Water Resources, developing, kind of being that more tight core team that's creating the narrative and that document, of course, with input from other agencies as well, but just really like that was the most intensive involvement from those agencies. And this time around, we're including the Department of Land Conservation and Development in that team, acknowledging that there's a huge role that land use plays in our water issues. So that's kind of a nice change for this next round here. And then, of course, we've also got the Water Core Team, which is a collaboration of about 15 agencies that are meeting on a regular basis. And so I've had access to that team to access other agencies that are outside of the project team and get involvement from those folks as well. And then finally, we do also have the federal liaison team. So that team is less involved, I would say, in the narrative and the development of the Integrated Water Resources Strategy, but still critical to the development and the update because there are so many programs that overlap with our state services. Next slide, please. So a little about our outreach and engagement. So we did have, I mentioned that we hired a facilitation consultant for this component. So we hired Oregon's Kitchen Table, which is a program out of Portland State University. We hired them in late 2022. So they helped us design the outreach and engagement, and we did several different things. We did something that we've also done in the past, so in-person community meetings. That was a component that we did in May and June. So we had 7 meetings at different locations across the state. We also had one virtual community meeting, just so folks that weren't able to attend one in person, they could also contribute in that manner. The format, the questions were very similar in that space. And then culturally specific conversations. Those look different depending on the situation. So this was something that Oregon's Kitchen Table was working closely with community-based organizations and community leaders to lead. And then there were also 3 youth-specific events that were done. And so all of this work that Oregon's Kitchen Table was helping to lead, including the public survey, all of those findings were summarized in a final report, and we just released that. So it is available on our website. Oregon's Kitchen Table, of course, also has that on their website too. And the nice thing is that they've also translated their findings as well. We did the public survey in 9 languages, and so those same 9 languages are reflected in their summary report as well. So there is a full long report and also a nice short and sweet executive summary as well that you can look at. Next slide, please. And then just a few other pieces that were separate from what we did with Oregon's Kitchen Table. We did also have an agency survey that we did, so that was cross-agency. And then we also have been doing outreach and consultation with the tribes. And just as part of this similar presentation here, I've been presenting to different state agency boards and commissions throughout the summer. So that's an important piece as well. The sister agencies on our project team are all hearing from me, and then other commissions as requested. Next slide, please. Now I'll just go through some high-level findings that we had from a few of those different pieces. So the public survey was a very, very good turnout, honestly. 1,700 responses was far more than I had anticipated. Really interesting findings here that we were seeing a lot of agreement on certain things, and then some really disparate, different ends of the spectrum kind of comments as well. So everyone is acknowledging that water availability is a challenge. There was a lot of comments regarding access to safe and sufficient water not being equitably distributed across the state. People have concerns about climate change. They also have concerns about other natural disasters. And there was a lot of discussion also in these public survey responses regarding water rights. There was a really strong opinion about changing the current system. And then on the other end of the spectrum, a lot of comments regarding the need to keep that system exactly as is. Next slide, please. And the agency survey that we conducted in April had some interesting findings as well. So I think the take homes for me on this is that I think we need to do a better job at familiarizing state agencies with the IWRS. We were finding limited familiarity from folks. And then also I need to connect more agency programs to the recommended actions. And then also a call for a summary or an overview. So folks that don't have time to dig into the IWRS, they were requesting, is there a way that we can just quickly see, something that we can download or, digest in an easier manner? And then also requesting online access was something that folks had mentioned. And there were a lot of different comments here that were really interesting. Some of them mentioning maybe having a mapping tool so that you could physically see where in the landscape water projects are occurring in the state, and then all the way to the other end, where just asking for the document, which is currently available as a PDF, having that be converted more into a dashboard style where we can see real time what recommended actions are being acted on and who's doing what on those actions. So pretty interesting findings there from the agency survey. Next slide, please. And then just finally, I'll mention the Water Resources Commission. So in June, I did have an extended work session with the commission, and we talked through a few different goals for that next version of the IWRS. And so there was a lot of discussion about the role of the IWRS, how it is, it's a statewide strategy, it should be visionary, but then we also have very specific actions. And so really the discussion there just being like, what is that right level that this document can operate at and still maintain trackability and functionality. There was also a consensus amongst the commission that climate change needed more emphasis within the document. And there was also a discussion about pointing out how regionally different the state is and how we're going to be experiencing and are experiencing climate in a regionally different manner. And then of course, accountability was something that came up a lot too. So looking at the recommended actions, the commission was requesting that we could more clearly and quickly see the who that's attached to those recommended actions so that we can improve accountability regarding accomplishing those actions. And then finally, just the need for elevating the strategy overall across all of the agencies that are involved. Next slide, please. Right, so we're just going to go quickly through content of the IWRS, and I'm really just going to be focusing here on the components that are related to work at DLCD. Next slide, please. So this is what's referred to as the framework for the Integrated Water Resources Strategy, and this was included in the packet of information that was provided to the Commission. This is an easy way to look at what the entire document really can boil down to in terms of the objectives, the critical issues, and the recommended actions that I've mentioned a few times. So there are 51 recommended actions that are listed here. And so I'm just going to go through a few that are relevant to DLCD. So next slide, please. So this slide here, I think is a helpful way to kind of bucket what these different objectives are. Two of them are really focusing on data and the need for collecting that data. The first one being water supplies, so understanding our water resources like groundwater and surface water. The second data need, so that second box there on the right, being more about our demands. So our in-stream demands for ecosystem needs and our out-of-stream demands. So things like, irrigation and drinking water and municipalities and things like that. And then the third one being pressure. So the challenges or considerations that are impacting both our water supplies and our demands. And then that final box there is the primarily solutions that are being proposed to help us meet our water needs. Next slide, please. So here I've just highlighted a few of the boxes that I think have the most direct connection to DLCD. I think there's a lot of other overlap that you would find once you dig in there, but I just wanted to hit these few sections because I think the direction or the connection is very clear. So next slide, please. So the first one I'll mention here reflects one of the comments that we were just discussing a few moments ago about the forecast and the role of Portland State University. So that first action there, 2A, regularly update long-term water demand forecast. This is something that is directed in the IWRS to be done with regular frequency. The last one was done in 2015. And so those population forecasts are critical for being able to do this work. So that is something that is specifically mentioned in the IWRS. Next slide, please. Kind of jumping over to the pressures component of that framework. So climate change is a significant component of DLCD's work, of course. And then extreme events was another category within that. So at this current time, there are just 3 extreme events that are categorized there. So drought, floods, and the Cascadia subduction earthquake are all mentioned in that portion of the report. Next slide, please. And then there is an entire section titled Water in Land Use. And this section of the IWRS does go into detail regarding the statewide planning goals, and it does outline specific planning goals and their connection with water. So this is probably the section of the document that has the most overlap with DLCD's work. Right, next slide, please. And here I'm just giving you a little bit more of a zoomed in view of that water and land use section. So I did want to mention in the full document itself, you have these recommended actions that would be, 6A, 6B, 6C. That's a high level recommended action. And then within that, if you're looking at the narrative itself, you're given many example actions beneath that to kind of give a sense of who the person or the agency is that might be doing that action, or just a little bit more context for that recommended action. So I've just included one bullet here for each one of these that I think helps tie or give an example of how it does tie to DLCD's work. So for example, DLCD is actually listed there in 6B under the example of how to improve state agency coordination. So the mention there is to update state agency coordination programs with DLCD's support there. And then of course, 6C does talk specifically about low impact development practices and green infrastructure. So again, another category, another space where DLCD's work overlaps as well. Next slide, please. And then place-based planning is a really significant other effort that DLCD has been involved with. So I appreciate the assistance from DLCD in these projects here. So for folks that aren't familiar with place-based planning, there was a pilot project that was undertaken, I believe in 2015, that process began. So it's been a long time here of having these pilot programs go through this effort. And so this portion of the document really outlines that process. And the nice thing is for this next update, we've had a lot of lessons learned from that process. And we now have a kind of a new chapter in place-based planning. So that program was set to sunset, and with the large House Bill 2010 that was passed, that includes a lot of water legislation, kind of the omnibus bill that was put together. There is some funding set aside for a permanent place-based planning fund. There was an appropriation of $2 million for that fund. So the Water Resources Department will be doing some rulemaking in the coming months to help stand up that program and get that off the ground. So that's really exciting that the place-based planning has now gone from a pilot project to more of a permanent fixture in our planning process. Next slide, please. And finally, so the healthy ecosystems category, this category really touches a lot on restoration and things regarding, eradicating invasive species and removing fish barriers. And so really a combination of both watershed and, large-scale watershed improvements, but also some very specific stream-specific actions as well. So I think this category, I like to think about it as also having a large role in climate resiliency. There is a lot of discussion in the narrative regarding watershed health and how you can increase resiliency with restoration practices as well. Next slide, please. And this is our last one, that last category that we have in the Integrated Water Resources Strategy. The last one I'll be covering today. So the funding category is a standalone description that really encompasses a lot of what is talked about higher up in the Integrated Water Resources Strategy, because of course, all of these recommended actions, most of them require additional funding. They either require additional capacity, maybe a new policy, but often either continuing an existing agency's program, or perhaps in some cases, developing a new one. So this funding category does cover, I feel like, the full suite of things associated with the IWRS. The first one really being that we need to support, if we want to have an integrated water resources strategy, we need to fund the development and implementation of that on an ongoing basis. Then there's also a line item that talks about a recommended action that talks about funding water resource management activities. And so that category to me is one of the most broad ones. It's really stating that we need to support our state agencies in doing the work that they do to help keep our water security here. So, and then the final three categories are, two of them really are more planning related. So supporting local regional planning efforts, a lot of connection there, of course, with DLCD's work, feasibility studies, and then finally investing in implementation. So that final action there being a little bit more tied to on the ground projects. And that really ranges from infrastructure projects to restoration projects and kind of everything in between. Right, next slide, please. All right, and I do have, next slide, please. I do have just one slide here of some things that we've already been working on with the team, the IWRS project team, in terms of topics that we've been discussing and some things that are missing from the current IWRS that we want to add in the next one. So I'll just list a few considerations here. So historical context, there's a lot of pieces I think that we can add there just in terms of how we got to where we are. Tribal collaboration has really changed since 2017. So I think there is a lot of reason to expand that explanation of where we're at currently right now. And climate change emphasis is something I had discussed a little bit earlier, something the commission had also identified as just wanting to see more emphasis throughout the document regarding that. And then affordability and access to water in general is something that we also want to address. It's right now, currently, it's not really highlighted at the front end of the document as an urgent need. So we're considering ways to maybe do that. And then of course, accountability has been another piece that I've also kind of been talking about throughout this presentation about looking for ways to tie recommended actions more specifically to an agency or metrics in some cases, if it is possible to attach a metric to that recommended action, we might want to consider doing that as well. And then of course, there have been a lot of reports, many reports over the last 5 years, 6 years now, that of course need to be incorporated into the integrated water resources strategy update. So the 100-year water vision has been also a significant water related effort that will be reflected in that document as well. So with that, I'd like to open it up to questions and hear if there are any discussion items, questions, clarifications that the commission has.
Commissioners, any questions?
We can go to the next slide too.
Commissioner Warren.
Yeah, I'm interested to know what kind of checks and balances we have in place for when considering like urban growth boundary expansions. Are there any sort of requirements for cities to prove that they have adequate water for those areas?
To my knowledge, there is not. It's more of an infrastructure requirement. If someone else has another piece of knowledge on that, I would certainly want to hear from them. But to my knowledge, it's really just that we need to show that there's infrastructure capacity, not necessarily the water capacity.
Vice Chair.
Thank you. And I'll just address Commissioner Warren's comment to begin with. The city of Redmond, when I worked with the city, gosh, over a decade ago, and we expanded the urban growth boundary, we did a reconnaissance level public facility analysis. And part of that, and then we created annexation agreements that did specifically address water rights, just given that a lot of the properties that we brought in did have water rights, and we wanted a mechanism there to make sure that the city had adequate water supply to serve the projected growth going forward. I'm not sure about the city of Bend or others, but that's one example of where that did happen. I was just going to jump back to the other question, and I could. So just so you're aware, I live in Bend. I represent Eastern Oregon. I could talk about water all afternoon. I'll keep my comments brief. And I'm glad to hear that it's being integrated with the Department of Land Conservation and Development. We're updating our comprehensive plan now. That'll be a topic of discussion later this afternoon under a different topic. And we hear continuously from our residents across the county about the importance of the integration of water and land use. And so it's absolutely essential that we do that. It's critical. All you have to look at the local bulletin this morning, our local newspaper. Yes, I still take the newspaper at home, and on OPB this morning about OWRD denying the water for Thornburg Resort. And I'm not expressing an opinion one way or the other about that, but the local governments, we're always in the position of when people ask, does the resort or does the development or whatever it is have adequate water supply? Local governments, well, at least counties, our general response is we don't have jurisdiction. We're reviewing the development based on whatever the criteria are in the code, and then it's conditioned upon OWRD's approval of water rights, et cetera, whatever that whole system looks like. So it'll be interesting to see if in the longer term, it's better integrated with permitting and development in rural counties. The other piece I have is, and going back to 6B, and I appreciate the partnership with DLCD. And my question, I guess, really there is, it's great that the department's collaborating with DLCD and in terms of comprehensive planning, and I'm sure there are a lot of key elements with Goal 5 resources, et cetera, but it's local governments that are implementing the statewide planning program. So I think, and I don't expect an answer today, but it'll be interesting to see how it trickles down or how it ultimately is implemented by local governments through comprehensive plans, through permitting, through development codes, et cetera. There are a lot of issues, but great to say that I'm glad that it's integrated and the department's going to be involved. And I see the tribal collaboration, which is critical. And I also hope there's local government collaboration in the process as well, again, because we're at the front lines of implementing this statewide planning program. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair.
Other questions from commissioners? I had a question. Oh, I was just curious how this is like a not a long range plan, but I saw something about 100 years, thinking about the larger picture. And I was just curious from your department, mainly because I just don't know, how does that interact with the legislature and their priorities and bills that get passed, or governors? I'm just more curious, how do you enact what seems like a reasonable long range plan with the changes that happen every year?
Thank you, Chair Holova. So the plan there, so there is, yes, a few different things going on just in terms of scale. So the original integrated water resources strategy was looking at a 50-year horizon. There is the 100-year water vision. That was a separate effort that was done a couple of years ago, and it had a very similar outreach and engagement effort. And so we're incorporating a lot of the findings and the public input from that process into the integrated water resources strategy, and actually combining those two instead of running a separate effort. So the 100-year water vision was a process that was initiated by a former governor and is now not actively supported by a specific agency. All of those findings in that effort are kind of now housed within WRD and OWEB, the two agencies that were helping to lead that effort as well, or provide support on that effort. And so, so that information is being incorporated. That concept of a 100-year vision, I think, can still be reflected in the strategy. And the same thing with 50 years, right? It's a very, this is where we need to go. But at the end of the day, the strategy does get very specific in terms of the recommended actions that are needed to help us move in a better direction as far as water security is concerned. And so the way that can actually happen in a shorter timeframe is that direction that was given at the front end of the document itself for agencies to develop work plans. So the idea is that we update this integrated water resources strategy and make sure that we're reflecting, what's needed to get things, resolve issues, or maybe get things moving in a different direction. Identify what those things are, and then have agencies sit down and start developing work plans. And a component of that would then also be their budget planning that they're doing. So that's happening every 2 years. And so something that we were looking at in terms of the timing on this specific update to the integrated water resources strategy is making sure that we're getting this done in a timely manner, so that all of the agencies that are starting to work on their new budget plans at the beginning of 2024, that long budgeting process is the beginning. We want to make sure that they have all of the recommended actions in front of them for that effort. So that would be, I think, my answer in terms of how we can get this long range vision and strategy down to kind of parsing it out into actionable pieces, is that it's really comes down to those work plans and the policy option plan development that agencies are doing on a regular basis.
May I jump in too with a response? As a couple things that strike me as I don't know if it was leading or prescient in the IWRS, but the water data portal, which received money in the last legislative session and then just this most recent legislative session, is something that is called out in the IWRS as having a better way of delivering data on water to users. And then the other is the encouragement of using green infrastructure in cities around the state. And we have the green infrastructure bill that was just passed that gave DLCD 4 positions and several $1 million in grant funding to distribute to local governments. So again, I don't know if we can say that the IWRS caused that, or if it's just is in line with what we need, but we can definitely draw links there.
Thank you. That makes sense. And I just wanted to ask Director Bateman, since you were involved in this in the past, I was trying to think, is there an equivalent to this type of document within our department? Because that's why I was asking a question about how does that interface, just so I can orient myself on a whole different department.
Thank you, Chair. Not exactly. I mean, our strategic plan, I think, does call out and cross-reference to what a lot of other partners are doing. But this water strategy pulled together for the first time under one cover all of the discussion around data, policy, programs from 18 different state agencies, 10 federal agencies, and our 9 federally recognized tribes. So that was really trying to get our arms around the entire water conversation, water quantity and quality. Those reside in 2 different agencies. And so it's a pretty unique document. I've brought my desk copy with me in case anybody would like to look through it, because it's not only technically, very robust, but it's a piece of art too. So just a quick shout out to my co-author, Alyssa Micken, who made sure that everything that was in here was both correct and beautiful. But that's a document that we're really proud of. And as Amanda just noted, we're starting to see, and Crystal noted too, we're starting to see pieces of it land in state budget, which is great. Not only the pieces that Amanda just mentioned, but also some really important updates and modernization with regard to groundwater, dam safety, well construction. But you're right, they come in spurts. They come in the 2-year budget cycles. And so we just have to chip away at some of the 50-year challenges that we identified in the document. It's really hard to match that up with a state that does everything on a 2-year budget cycle. That's pretty difficult. I did want to speak to a previous question as well on whether we talk back and forth between land and water when we're developing lands. I think there's some mention of it, in the law and on paper, but we're not very good at it. So if you've heard of land use compatibility statements, LUCs, we are supposed to be conferring back and forth between the land and the water agencies, but there are big loopholes in there that read something like, I can't remember what the time period is, but if you haven't heard back within X number of days, consider yourself good to go. It's not very strong in terms of holding each other accountable and ensuring that there's indeed water available for that piece of property. Not really the way I think it was originally envisioned. And Steve, I don't know if you have any comment on the LUC system or where folks can find more information about that. Okay. I can see over your shoulder, you've got some things up on the screen, but I would say it's rather loose in terms of how it really works.
Yeah, I was actually looking at the other question about, the interface of the land use and where water comes in. And I said, really in Goal 14, it was only the orderly and economic provision of public facilities and services that get accounted for, not necessarily water availability, unless it fell within the comparative environmental consequences piece.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot more we could be doing there. Something I'm personally interested in and have as a goal to make those ties strong, and the data and the decision making more robust between those 2 issue areas. I would say that the land use goals are spelled out in the water strategy, and thanks for that go to Rob Halliburton, who was our liaison to DLCD at the time. So he made sure some of the fundamentals were in here, and then he also made sure the state agency coordination agreements were mentioned in here and called out as something that would really help us move forward if we were better coordinated between agencies.
No, one of the things I was thinking about with regard to like the budget cycle is one could look at this 2 different ways. One could look at it as a negative in the sense that, oh, there's not enough water, you can't move forward with your development, like a stick. And I was thinking more in the opposite, like planning for the future, or thinking about how to conserve, make sure clean water supply, like all the different things with water. And so that's where sort of my mind was at, like not to become like a state like California where they're, environment just shuts down, is used to shut down development, but like one in which planning promotes both environmental kind of quality and health and also development. So that's just where my mind was thinking.
Yes, I agree, Chair. I don't think that there's a lot of new water, quote, new water to be had, but there's a lot we could be doing for a cost with regard to cleaning up water, sharing water, transferring what we have, creating markets, and just maybe thinking a little bit differently about where our water comes from and how we get it.
Thank you. I didn't know if there were any more discussion questions. If not, I wanted to thank both Crystal and Amanda for being with us today, virtually and in person. And with that, we'll conclude item number 3. We were thinking about having a break because we're running ahead. And so our thought process was having a break until 3:30 and then coming back at 3:30 with commission business. And wanted to make sure 3:15. Feel free to free at 3, you think? Okay. We can do that. We don't have anything that anyone's coming for that we don't know yet. Okay. So at 3 o'clock, 15-minute break, we'll come back and resume with item number 4, commission business. Thank you.
And the tour.
In case I have to turn to the left for it.
Okay, we're back. Rich turning. I'm just waiting. Sorry, we're having an echo in the room. Okay. We're back for our Land Conservation and Development Commission meeting in July, and we're moving on to item number 4 on our agenda, which is commission business led by Director Brenda Bateman.
Thank you, Chair. We are going to start commission business today as we've kind of started our tradition recently, featuring the work of the commissioners themselves. And so wanted to start by welcoming and inviting any commissioners who would like to maybe go down the line and report in on any activities or observations that you've had since the last commission meeting.
This is where we're talking about our different areas where we live and what
you've been up to.
what we've been
Yes.
up to. Okay, so maybe Commissioner Warren, you can go first.
Sure. I've been somewhat disconnected the last month and a half because I've been pretty busy from Southern Oregon. However, I know that Medford's working on their climate action and resiliency plan right now, and I think that's coming to kind of a head, which is exciting to see them to take on that role and move forward. I know that they're also working through the climate friendly and equitable communities program, and really moving forward some of the parking stuff and starting to work on their climate friendly area research as well. Other than that, I have nothing much to report at this point.
Okay, Vice Chair Leela.
Trying to find my unmute button there. Great, thank you. So fortunately, I've had an opportunity to already discuss 2 of the topics that I would report on. One, during the grants, I just mentioned the need for additional assistance for particularly small cities across the state for planning assistance, as they just limited resources, if any. So we've already covered that one, and then water is such a significant one for us. So I've covered both of those. I'll touch on 3 others really quickly. One, of course, here we are in wildfire season now, and as I heard, I think I earlier referenced reading something on OPB this morning, or heard it on OPB this morning. Well, this was yesterday, where it was a staff member from the Environmental Protection Agency based in Bend, just talked about, there's a perception, and it's backed up by data now, that the last 5 to 10 years have been significantly more smoky in our region, and that's of course caused to more wildfires here. And so it just continued importance of integrating wildfire mitigation, protection, et cetera, with land use. So that's just an ongoing one. And fortunately, I look outside now, and our air quality index is pretty good right now, but it's been pretty poor earlier in the week. So that's number 2. Number 3, and this is a regional issue for us, and it's the rural homeless. It's not that we also have urban homeless, houseless, but the rural populations. It's I guess it's like what is it? The Oregon Travel Tourism Agency's slogan is "Things look different here." Well, when we talk about houseless and homeless, it really does look different in Deschutes County, in Central Oregon, and Eastern Oregon, because we have so much public land surrounding our cities. And so I can just really focus on Deschutes County, is that we have hundreds, if not thousands, of rural homeless living in both BLM, Bureau of Land Management, and Forest Service lands. And it's a very, very significant issue. And this is something that certainly my employer, Deschutes County, City of Bend, City of Redmond, City of Sisters, other local governments in our region are collectively trying to address through every means possible. And we have a really good ongoing dialogue right now with the governor's office. I've done my best to keep Director Bateman and Palmer Mason informed of our discussions, because they do revolve around the need for some additional, for some flexibility, as we're maximizing every, to the extent, I mean, there might be some disputes on specific properties proposals, but we need to do everything we possibly can to provide opportunities for safe, supported, or managed camps both inside urban growth boundaries and then close to urban growth boundaries beyond the urban growth boundaries. We're not talking about high value farmland or Goal 5 resources, things of that nature, but people are already living there. And what are some of the opportunities we can do to continue to support them in those locations? So that's the number one issue here. For sure. And then just the last piece I thought was very interesting. In June, I guess I could still say it was last month, the City Club of Central Oregon hosted Bill Fulton, if I recall his name. He's a national growth management, smart growth expert specialist. And he talked about kind of the state of Oregon's land use system. And he talked about some of the things for us just to keep in mind going forward. And it really resonated with, I think, a lot of people there. And it's not about changing the goals, changing the outcomes, but it's about streamlining our processes as we think and talk about adopting new administrative rules or new requirements for local governments. How do we not just put those on top of additional requirements? How do we integrate them? How do we remove them? How do we prioritize, again, to achieve the same outcomes? Not at all intended to change that, but it really, I think it resonated well with a lot of people. Just as times change, so do our goals, our rules, our processes. So how do we best make the program work for our current conditions and circumstances? So that'll conclude my comments for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Lazo, we're discussing you're going to talk a lot tomorrow about what's hot in our region, but maybe some thoughts for the public audience on what's going on in relation to land use and other areas related.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks. Sorry to join late. And to not be able to join you downtown today. I'm only about 5-6 miles away from you, but my schedule just didn't allow me to be downtown today. So good to see you all. Yeah, thank you, Chair Holova. And yeah, tomorrow I'm really looking forward to the tour tomorrow. It's really it'll be less of a context for today's issues, but context for how it is that we got to some of today's issues, the historical context for that in our city here in our state. So looking forward to seeing you all tomorrow morning. I think for me, it's always going to be about housing, and particularly in the urban area in Portland. And it's nice to see the work that's starting to move forward around the HB 2001 pieces that are moving forward. We are, as an organization, are starting to comment on some of the housing production strategy work that's being done around the state. And we actually just got connected, or starting to get connected, with the City of Portland and Bureau of Planning Sustainability folks that are working on their housing capacity analysis, their housing needs analysis, and looking at how that might move into their housing production strategy. So looking forward to that conversation with them, and maybe starting some of that over the next couple of days. And I really appreciate, Commissioner Lilac, what you're saying, talking about your region and the folks that are experiencing houselessness in that there, and how different that might look than what folks are going to be experiencing, as they come into our city here. And it's just, nonetheless, it is a critical and vital piece of what we need to contend with in every part of our state. And amazing how different it does look, and really points to the fact that we really need a broad swath of solutions to take care of these issues. So I know that as an agency, some of those solutions rest with us, and we have the opportunity to be involved in some of those. And so I'm looking forward to the work that we do that can help resolve that crisis in the areas that we are able to. So yeah, looking forward to seeing you all in person soon.
Thank you. I didn't know if Commissioner Sandoval was with us still. I wanted to give a chance if he is. No. Okay. And I know he had an excused absence, but I was glad he was able to join for the beginning of the meeting. I think for me, I feel like a lot of things has happened. But related to this world, I went to ULI conference in Toronto in the spring, and it was just really interesting to be in a completely different city/country, hearing about their land use issues, their density, what they're doing. So I think later on, if you want to talk to me directly about it, I think Urban Land Institute is ULI. And just interesting things about density there. I don't know if I've ever seen that many new skyscrapers all together at once in my life. So that was interesting. And how their purposeful dense growth density is related to their purposeful increased acceptance of new immigrants into their country. And it was interesting to find out 50% of their of Toronto are foreign born, and that's very intentional on the fact of Canada and Toronto. And it was just fascinating is the best way to describe it. A lot of things to learn from, a lot of things I thought they could learn from Oregon, so it was good. And then I was able to ring the bell at the New York Stock Exchange, which was amazing. Unexpected, in my role as chair of the U.S. Green Building Council, which just celebrated their 30th anniversary this year. So 2 big anniversary celebrations. The reason I'm bringing up in this context, besides the 30-year part, was that was also the day that I flew in where New York was experiencing forest fires. And so I couldn't see a single thing when we landed at all. And you're landing in JFK. And it was just, we've been dealing with this a lot on the West Coast for a while. And it was just interesting to be in New York where people are just like so blown away by this new thing that none of them experienced. And it was just, it's like you don't want anything bad like that to happen to anyone, but just to have that seat of power and money in real time experiencing and being like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do about these forest fires? It was just interesting that the East Coast, and then I actually flew through Toronto on another occasion since I last saw you, and there was smoke there also. And then I heard about Pittsburgh and Washington, people in Washington DC were talking about it. So I think we've definitely hit I feel like the tipping point where everybody is experiencing some form of climate change. And then the question is, how energized are we to actually do something about it? So I thought those were interesting. I think my main things that I are aware of have to do in the development sphere, and specifically with thinking about housing development. There's some major issues going on right now. I think you can read about them probably with regard to the lending world, the banking world. I think a couple weeks ago, I learned more about specifically in relation to housing in a way that I want to say, frankly, a little shocked. A lot of the banks that have been doing construction loans on housing projects have completely either stopped lending on multifamily housing or have drastically pulled back with no understanding of when they're going to resume lending on it. And I know I've been talking to a couple developers who are in the process of a completely ready to go project who aren't able to find senior debt on it. That is not common at all in our industry. I mean, there's always been construction financing to fund multifamily housing. So I kind of, after that, talked to a bunch of different people, and I guess as a one-person experience, feel like some of the more deeply affordable housing projects that deal with LIHTC credits, from the people I've talked to, they don't seem to be having a problem getting debt, but it's pretty much like anybody, but above that, like workforce housing, all the rest. And I can't say that's across the board, but I've also been talking to at least 5 banks I've talked to in the last 2 weeks who have all indicated the same thing happening either at their bank or at another bank that they had heard of. So really lending at this construction level for development projects happens with regional banks. And I think with the SVB situation and the First Republic situation and the whole banking situation, I might be grossly overestimating this, but I think there's been a lot of, I don't want to say flight to larger banks. And when you have less deposits in regional banks, from what I've heard, that the lending starts to slow down in the regional banks, which are the ones that fund construction projects for development. So I just wanted everybody to be kind of aware that's a real-time thing that's happening. And I know that there were some bills at the state trying to address potential gaps in lending in relation to needed affordable housing. And I think they didn't pass this session. And I know there's some housing production strategies that kind of alluded to, wouldn't it be nice if the state played a role in either guarantees or actually being a construction lender, specifically in rural communities or areas where banks just don't lend traditionally. I think we've all known that's been a problem. What we know now is everywhere, at least in Oregon. That's where I know information about. I don't know about other states. So I just wanted to say it's a big deal. And I think a lot of times government has a lag in information from the private sector. And one of my roles in this role is to make sure that there's no lag, that we all know what's happening. So it's a little long-winded, but I wanted to make sure that I was able to say that. So thank you, Director.
Good. Thank you, Chair. And I would invite you to make those same comments tomorrow. I think it's tomorrow when our housing team is here at the dais and all fully present in front of you, because, you know, there are additional activities going on in this space, although some bills didn't make it through the legislative session this past summer. The Housing Production Advisory Council continues its work, and it's supposed to be more long-term, and, you know, what didn't pass, what else should we be looking at, what should we be pushing forward. And so the staff members that will be here for that agenda item are also the same staff members helping the council. And I think a reminder to them that this type of activity needs to be, they need to follow through with that and maybe help bring in subject matter experts and get these issues in front of the council. That would be a good note.
Yeah, and sorry, I just want to continue on. Like, this might be a blip, right? And everybody keeps on saying January. So January might come and everybody might refresh their commitment to funding housing, but it's good for the government to kind of be a steady, you know, when these market forces happen, that we have that awareness. And yeah, thank you for pointing out. It's good that there's a body that's thinking about this constantly now.
Thank you. Well, continuing on with the report, we wanted to invite our Chief Financial Officer forward to provide the Budget and Management Committee update to all of you. Thank you, Amy. Go ahead and introduce yourself again.
Thank you, Director Bateman. We have a slide presentation, if you could please.
Just a moment while we bring up the PowerPoint.
Chair Holova, Vice Chair Lilac, members of the commission, good afternoon. Once again, I am Amy Metler, your newest CFO. And to my left is Rochelle Corbo, our budget officer. And today we have a brief presentation to update you regarding our budget pertaining to the last biennium and the next. Get better at this. Next slide, please. As an overview, generally, when it comes to budgeting at this period in the budget cycle, we have our foot in 3 different budget periods. One in the past, one in the current, and one in the future. And so currently we are wrapping up the 21-23 biennium. We are doing our year-end closing procedures so that we can prepare our financial statements. Our spending was kept on track with our budget, and so we did really good in that fiscal year. And our reversion was on par with the previous biennia. To speak about reversion, it's a word that we use often, and I want to define it a little bit. That's the money that if we do not spend it, it reverts back to the state. And so it's kind of a use it or lose it when it comes to those funds. So we do try to keep that to a minimum and use all of our funds, but we also don't want to be wasteful and use them just to spend them up. So it's a balancing act. And then for the current 23-25 biennium, we have received approval of our budget, although the governor has not yet signed it, but we're now implementing our legislatively adopted budget that we very carefully planned before. So Rochelle is doing a lot of scheduling things out and handing individual budgets to our departmental managers and making sure that all the funding is there for our positions. And then we are also gathering information via the BAM subcommittee to work on updating some of these charts and formats. Because I'm the new CFO and we've had some changeover and we're going to have some new commissioners, we would like to make sure that we're providing you with information in a format that you most need it. And then coming up in the next biennium that we're looking forward to, which is 25-27, we're launching our budget build for that. It's a long, slow process. And so in our April or spring meeting, we expect to present more to you on that matter. Next slide, please. And next we'll move on to the budget financial graphs and tables are included in your packets. We're just going to touch on a few key points on these. And our first graph here is our appropriation summary. Basically, these are our projected expenditures at the end of the biennium as of May 31st. So with 1 month left of spending to go. The current projection of ending reversion is 240,000, which as we noted is pretty close to what we did last biennium. The final uncommitted amount of general fund grants is less than 25,000. Next graph, please. Our next graph is the funds dispersed by May of 2023. And so a lot of expenditures and grants still come in these last couple of months. Our final closing for the financial statements is August 15th. And so these numbers will go up not only with the closing of July, but also with what the state calls month 13. Month 13 is just those final closeout of like our accruals and our financial statements. So these will change slightly, but that's where we stood as of the end of that month. A large portion of the billing from the local governments comes in after June 30th. A lot of those local governments hold all of their bills and just send us one big invoice every year. And so that's what largely drives that. And also we want to note that our funding went up quite a bit and our activity went up quite a bit since the previous biennium. However, our grant and accounting functions were able to keep pace. We're hoping for a little bit more staffing in that area in the future, but so far we've been doing really well. Next graph, please. All right, graph number 3 is our budget versus actual. As noted earlier, our general fund legislatively adopted budget is projected to come in under budget while also minimizing that reversion. You can see those reversion projects that we tried to reclaim some of those funds rather than lose them in the orange over there on the right, the 532,000. And staff hope that improvements in grant tracking and analyses of past biennia are going to make it so that we can minimize that reversion even more in future periods. All right, and on to the next slide, please. And so in this table, we summarize the bills that landed that actually got passed through the most recent legislative session and the positions and funding that we expect to get to go along with them. This is not yet completely final, so these are just projections, but they should be pretty close. We're expecting to get 5 positions in House Bill 3409 that are limited duration positions. 4 are for the small green infrastructure grants. The other position is intended to identify ways to reduce conflicts in Eastern Oregon, specifically between farm use and solar energy facilities, which are occasionally at odds. 2 of the positions above will be administrative services. So as I noted, we'll get a little more help in our accounting department. We'll get a procurement contract specialist and an accountant 1. As you may have heard earlier, some of that funding doesn't come in 100% for the entire biennium. And so those 2 positions aren't funded until January. And so we can't quite go out for hire on those, but we are looking forward to that happening. House Bill 5506 is the omnibus end of session bill, and it changed the limited duration position for our climate-friendly equitable communities to a permanent position, full-time position, which makes it a lot easier for us to retain quality personnel. And then you're going to receive a lot more information about these bills and the effects of them in your presentations on Friday. So I'm not going to go into a whole lot more detail on that. Next slide, please. And that wraps it up. So I'm going to open the floor to any questions or comments that we might have.
Commissioners, any questions?
Excellent. Well, thank you so much.
I had a question.
Appreciate your
Sorry.
time.
I just wait till everybody.
Sorry.
I had I think 3 questions. One was on the revisions. Reversions. You were saying that that's similar to years prior, the 532,000, or I heard 25,000 and then I heard, so I was just trying to.
I'm going to turn it over to my associate.
Yeah. Thanks, Chair Helva. And commissioners, the reversion, the amount will be returning to the state unexpended general grants. General funds from our operations will be what is usually we turn in around $200,000 unused. The general fund grants, we had $25,000 in uncommitted funds. So almost all $7.5 million were committed out to local jurisdictions or contractors working directly with local jurisdictions. We had, the orange bar you saw, 530,000, that was funds that would have gone back, but we rerouted them to other projects for the agency. And that's actually a little bit higher than other biennia because coming out of COVID, we had a lot of positions open that were vacant at the very beginning of the biennium. And then we had a bunch of LDs to fill. So we had a higher than normal vacancy rate, which is why you see the payroll budget is slightly under what was budgeted. And that mostly went to those, we call them reversion projects, but it's to keep them from reverting. So
Projects, that's the word.
yeah.
Okay. The other question I had was, I think, I was looking at graph 2 and I was like, I know something's not computing in my brain. And I'm realizing maybe and you can think about it, maybe in the future for graph 2, we show dollars on the left-hand side and that the pie equals 100, the stack chart equals 100, but so that we can see that the two bienniums were getting bigger, even though the percentage is shifting between the two. I don't know if that'd be helpful, but I was looking at them as if they were equal budgets and I realized they're not equal.
That would be helpful.
And then on the chart at the table 1, I was just curious what other funds was at 1.7 below the line.
Yes, Chair. We receive, we have interagency agreements with the Office of Emergency Management. They receive the funding from federal FEMA. And then we are a sub-grantee. That's our natural hazards mitigation planning program. Those come to us as other fund. So that is the limitation to have the authority to spend those dollars.
Even though it comes from federal, we don't call it federal funds because it comes through the state.
That's correct. Yeah. Because OEM has to count it as federal funds. So it would be double counting. Yeah.
Thank you.
Director Bateman. 1, for the record, that was Rochelle Corbo. And 2, I wanted to speak just a little bit more to the reversions and sort of why we have the balance that we do that reverts. I don't mind being a little bit more aggressive and spending some of those dollars down, and we will in the future. That's my hope. Part of what happened in this biennium that I just want to point out, because you may not have heard of it, was we were really worried about some wildly fluctuating numbers here in the last several months of the biennium because of some statewide difficulties with the Workday platform that we've adopted for statewide payroll. And the switch over to that system was actually so rocky that we had, the entire state had numbers that were just swinging back and forth. While we knew we would be fine in the end, we did not want to get ourselves into a situation at all where we had checks bouncing, right? Because we just didn't happen to be, right on that month or that day. And so we left ourselves quite a bit of padding so that wouldn't happen. We knew that we'd be fine by the end of the biennium, but in the meantime, we weren't exactly sure from day to day what our numbers were going to look like. So we were super careful there. And we ended up, darn it, we ended up with a large reversion again by the end of it, but I'd rather have it that direction than the other. So
we've identified projects to spend that money is what it sounds like.
And so there was a lot of money that we knew some of our grantees would not be able to make use of by the end of the biennium. And so where we had some certainty there, we redirected funds to other folks who've been in the queue and identifying their needs all along. So we were able to pretty easily pivot and get those dollars to other projects.
Sorry to ask another question just now. Now I'm understanding it more. The majority of that money is grants, or is it internal regular budget?
The majority of the reversion dollars comes from.
Most of it went to. Yes, sorry about that. A lot of that went to non-grant projects. So the grant money is appropriated separately from the operations money, right? And so when we're talking about redirecting grant funds, that was from grants that weren't going to happen, and we were able to redirect those to other grants. The payroll in the operations was going to be a little bit low, like I stated before, and those went to some other projects, some contracts that went out. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on some of the larger ones, but there's some. yeah, that was the general fund operations payroll. What we started working on that at the end of the first fiscal year in the biennium, and our process is to talk about them at managers meetings, what other projects are needed in the programs, and the managers kind of come to a consensus on what we should fund. And as we identify that more and more will be reverted back unless we find projects for them. So those were projects from the operational funds specifically for the programs. Some of those operational monies did go to grants, but that was mostly handled over by unspent previously committed grant funds. And then to get to what Director Bateman was saying, without going too far into the weeds, you're not allowed to overspend your general fund appropriation by a penny, but so much is contingent on being reimbursed from Office of Emergency Management. It helps support our federal expenditures that go out from general fund, but then we get reimbursed. And so you can't dip below your appropriated amount. So from all the accounting that's had to happen to get the funds where they need to be, we had to keep extra in surplus.
Excellent. Thank you. Yes, Vice
Chair
Deputy.
Lilac and
Deputy Director.
Commissioners, Kirsten Green here. My computer just lost battery, so I wasn't able to pull up the reversion list, but it is an interesting time, and Michelle described it accurately, with managers coming forth with sort of needs they have up their sleeve. And I do know that there was our climate change vulnerability assessment, that we had some additional community outreach that we helped fund through that, some additional work on the climate friendly and equitable communities work in communities. So programmatic, as well as, some just sort of agency needs, some maintenance, but it is a fun program. We can come back at future BAM and sort of share with Chair and Vice Chair at a BAM committee sort of what those examples were, if you'd like, at our next BAM meeting. Yeah, thank you.
Director.
If I could just turn back to Deputy again briefly, could you provide just a little bit more text or context around the climate change vulnerability assessment you just mentioned? Because I'm kicking myself. That was something I meant to mention when Water Resources was here on the line with us. They were talking about climate change, and we actually have a huge initiative that we are in the process of undertaking that I think will speak to how the state goes about its next era of climate change work. And so some of our dollars that we were just talking about went towards that project. And I think we'll want to feature that in future commission meetings, but wondered if you could just put a little bit more text around that.
Sure. I'm really excited about the work, and I know Christine Shirley is, because she wants to finish her document. She's been working on a document that was funded by the previous legislature. I think you've received a briefing about it in this last biennium, but now it's almost complete. Chris was hoping to complete it by June 30th. She's taken on a new project though, because we didn't receive funding to continue her work. So in order to retain Chris at the agency, she's now working 75% of her time on a natural hazard mitigation plan risk assessment for the state of Oregon through federal funding. So she's working hard to try and wrap up the climate change vulnerability assessment. I'm sure she would be pleased to bring that back for briefing at commission. One of our next steps is to do consultation with the 9 federally recognized tribes, each individually on that. We don't want to put out a report that implies that this is the entirety of the state's climate change vulnerability assessment without mentioning the tribes, who are really culturally and otherwise dependent upon water and the botany of the state. So we'll have a slow finish to the work. It's probably 90% done. They've done, Chris worked with the University of Oregon to do really significant outreach in all 7 geographic areas of the state, I believe. So very interesting work, working with the Oregon Climate Change Research Institute on the data around climate change and water availability and water falling, water coming and going. Brenda knows all these terms. Yeah. Precipitation. Yeah. Those words. Rainfall, snowpack, those kinds of things. Yes. So really interesting data inform the background of that report, and then community members just describing how they're feeling about it. So a lot of kind of social related work around how Oregonians are grappling with a warming climate and a climate that's bound to get even warmer, hotter, drier. So really fascinating piece of work. I too, Director, was sort of scribbling around about IWRS and the climate change work that Chris was, so having that same thought that there's a lot of nexus there, and Chris continues to convene at least 17 agencies, I think, show up every Friday for a phone call to continue the work of climate change adaptation framework that she had previously completed. So please stay tuned. One of our strategic plan elements is to create sort of a one climate office at DLCD, combining sort of always better integrating adaptation, sequestration, and mitigation. You remember that graph?
Diagram.
Yes, the graph, the diagram. So thanks for the question, for the opportunity, Director. I know Chris is really wanting to produce that. We're calling it a preliminary discussion draft of the work to be able to socialize that with the tribes. And then also Chris wants to send it back to the community members who participated in the engagement to also say, hey, this is what we heard. Is this right? Before she ties the bow on it in 2024. Thank you.
And I like the idea of bringing that graph, the chart back of the graph, just because it makes this more understandable too. Like, I'm just saying next time when a part of that graph talks to.
You bet. Yep, you
I don't
bet.
know if
Thank you.
everybody else knows what we're talking about, but yeah, okay.
The wheel of climate. Thank
The
you.
Wheel of climate. Yeah.
Chair, we used that in our budget presentation in front of the legislature this spring. So yes, we know and love that graph. Amy, anything further for you on budget?
That's all that we have. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Good. Moving along, I wanted to drop down in the report just a little bit and have a discussion about commission meeting dates, and we can look at the dates. I think that's important to get a sense from folks whether that meshes, the proposed dates mesh with your schedules or not. But I also wanted to just open it up and have a little bit more of a discussion about the frequency and the cadence of meetings, what you're thinking. As you will recall, we've tried to move a little bit from an every other month meeting cadence to quarterly during the legislative session in particular, because we're a small staff. And so we wanted to make sure that we were giving due diligence in the legislative realm. And so not every year has to look the same. During the off years when legislature is not meeting in its long sessions, we can certainly have a different type of cadence for meetings. So I'm looking at page 2 in your report, under commission business, and it's Roman numeral 5. We have 5 dates listed there proposed for 2025. So that's not quite back to the 6, but it's definitely more than the 4 that we had this year. And we're considering meeting on the South Coast in January. That might be dicey. I know weather and the South Coast don't necessarily go together well, but we've had a specific invitation from CT Clusie to come join them in their plank house during the rainy weather, which they say is really the time to be in there with the fire and really experiencing. So we wanted to honor that and get to the South Coast in January if we can. And then the other dates.
Say the city. I didn't hear.
CT Clusie, our tribal partners have extended an invitation to the commission to join them in their plank house. The other dates that are there don't necessarily have locations assigned to them yet. And part of the reason is, we wanted to get some feedback from you. You can see in attachment B some of the locations that the commission has held its meetings in the past. And so, of course, with COVID, we didn't go anywhere. So really, it's wide open as to the places we might go. But I did want to note that in our new budget that we've received from the legislature, they really slashed our ability to travel quite a bit. And so if we don't go back to them in an emergency board request or next February request, we find ourselves quite limited in budget, which is very disappointing, because I know one of the goals of this commission is to be in the community, to be in partnership and discussion with our local jurisdiction partners in particular. So just a note of caution there. We would love to travel whenever the legislature is not in session and we can get out of Salem, but we may find ourselves a little bit limited by dollars.
So we've done 2, I think, in the past, right? 2 travels per year.
I'm gonna turn to staff who have been here longer than I, looking wildly around the room.
Yeah.
3 travels around the state.
So when it was 6,
I
it was
think they're
3.
green.
Half.
When we had 6 meetings, it was 3 traveling.
Okay. So am I right to assume we're going to have at least 2
That would be our hope, at least
Lower
two.
budget. Okay.
Mhm. And so you'll see there the 5 bullets. We've got them spaced January, April, June, September, and December. And then we did have a conversation recently, Chair, about maybe slipping in one in November for a very specific purpose. So it wouldn't be the full A to Z type of meeting that these others are, the full business meeting. Next November, we find ourselves possibly needing a special meeting to accommodate some of the rulemaking and hearings work that the housing group needs to do in order to meet their legislative deadlines. So we might need an extra meeting there. But I'd also heard from Vice Chair Lilac, it might be nice to have a retreat for the commission about that time if we have an influx of new members. And then we'd also heard from the chair that in the past, the commission has really been locked in a room to complete the online training that is required of all volunteer commission and board members in the state when it comes to some of the IT.
When I got all my training done really well.
Right. So we might find an opportunity to get together for really a very different reason than your typical
We have to do it anyway. And I think it's just hard for all of us who are really busy to plan for it. So it's like, what better way to just say we're all here and we're doing it together. And then sometimes you might have like computer issues, right, when you're doing it. And then we just have somebody there who's helping us navigate that. So that was the best in that version to do that. Maybe we also do our conflict of interest, or, we do that at the same time. Just get it
all of our paperwork at the same time. I think that's a great idea. So there might be one additional meeting then slipped in there in November if that's an idea that folks are interested in. But just wanted to get your overall impressions on cadence, dates, locations, if you've got any thoughts.
Commissioners? Commissioner Warren?
I think 5 meetings is great. I was concerned that 4 meetings would not be enough and we'd have to fit too much in. And I think you all done a great job with that. But I think maybe 5 gives you a little more room to work with. And I think that works well for me. I'll have to come back to you all with my schedule once I start work on Monday and have an idea of what that's going to look like. But as of right now, it looks good to me.
Commissioner Lazo? I don't know if you had any comments.
Yeah, no, I think I'm fine with the cadence I'd agree with the notion that South Coast in January maybe is not our best option, but it sounds like we have an invitation, so I'd love to honor that. And I also I'm also fine, knowing a little bit of a preview of what we're going to be talking about on Friday with the housing team. I would agree with trying to put that in November rather than waiting till that December meeting. Because that gives us some backstop if there are things that need to push into December, because things will be needed to be implemented and moving by January 1 of 2025. So yeah, I'm fine with that also. That that put us in that 6 meeting range, but I'm fine with that cadence.
And I didn't call on you, Vice Chair, partly because we had just talked about this.
Yeah,
but if you had comments.
Thank you, Chair. We do. 4 meetings is a bit tough, and I think especially so right now when we meet in July and we don't meet again until November. It just feels like a long time. Where 5 feels really good. Maybe 4 would feel better if it were actually quarterly. 5 is just better, and then my other suggestion is, maybe we do have 4 full meetings, and then one meeting is just a retreat, or it's a tour with a round table of listening to locals, something of that nature, where we're at least getting together. I am sympathetic to the demands on staff of just going from one meeting to the next, and that's a big demand for sure. And maybe if we did it where we have a tour and a listening session, a round table, it would really lessen the demands on staff to prepare all the logistics. It's still a lot of logistics, no question, but maybe that would be a better approach. I'm not sure, but this was the first time I'd heard about the agency's budget being slashed for travel. That is really disappointing given how we serve the entire state. We've got a large state and we need to get around and get out and visit with, as I said earlier, our local partners who are responsible for implementing the statewide planning program. So yeah, thank you. It's great to be able to talk about it this far in advance so we can plan accordingly. Thank you.
And then I think all my comments have been made. We're mainly is what we had talked about, which is fine for me for the legislative time period. But after that, it seems disconnecting. And if you miss one, you've missed a lot, so I've been kind of encouraging to go to more, not necessarily to what we had before, but definitely I would hope 2 locations per year to visit. Did you want to talk about like what would be the other geographic area that has been sort of, if we look at these timelines, like, oh, it looks like we should be probably, I was looking at like Pendleton-ish area, just based on the dots. But I don't know.
Yep, we're happy to entertain any suggestions or preferences that the commissioners have in terms of where we need to be headed next.
I think it'd be really exciting to go to Southern Oregon and see how they're rebuilding from the Alameda fire. It's still very much a current thing. And there's still enough of like the legacy of the fire there that you can kind of see its impacts, and then you can see the new development alongside it. And I think that's really important for people to understand.
Commissioner, thank you for the invitation. We'll take you up on that. And we actually are hoping to get there in the next meeting in November, because we have a couple of action items that will that address that geography specifically. And so we thought we'd better aim for that region so that we can take those discussions up in the place that will be most affected.
This year for that.
This November.
Okay. So
Working
then if that
on it now.
happens, did anybody have any thoughts on next year? And my reaction to Pendleton was mainly just looking at how the dots and how long ago was it? Did you from the staff side have any leadership?
I should say that April 27th, I just want you to know, church time and a half on Saturday.
Oh no, 2024? Really?
Did some Saturday get slipped in there?
Yes, you're right.
Okay,
Correct.
so we'll check those dates.
Sure, fine. Sure.
Yes, a deputy director.
Vice Chair and Director Bateman, this is Kirsten again. I was wondering,
Oh, you might need to get closer to the mic.
seeing Chair Holova, you're looking up in Pendleton. Oh, it's 26, 2010. Okay, sorry. I was gonna vie for Burns Lakeview because of I thought it had been longer, but I was reading it wrong. So you're right that
Yeah, so I was looking at the small yellow dots and the red dots. Is sort of, I was just looking for all of the small. Where there's small yellow dots, a lot of them have bigger dots around them. So then I started just looking for the alone red dots. That makes sense.
It appears to be a long time since we met in Central Oregon. Things look different here.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I didn't even, is that Madras? Is that red? Or orange? It's red. Yeah. So that would be definitely another area. Prineville, Redmond, Bend. Yeah, that seems definitely an option. There's a lot going on there.
There is
a lot. You could just pick and choose what do you want to talk about type thing there. Okay.
Right. Exactly. Because the other piece that comes with that, as you mentioned already, is a bit of a roundtable with local partners. There's the opportunity to get out on the landscape and actually see some projects. So there will be some really good opportunities in all those communities you just mentioned. Oh, and Commissioner Lazo has a hand up.
Commissioner Lazo.
Thanks, Chair. The other thing we might think about when we start thinking about areas is how it might intersect with the work that we have in front of us at times. And, particularly with the housing and urbanization work, it tends to impact almost and the CFAC work, right? So some of those issues impact all communities, but some of the work doesn't impact every community. And so again, it's just something to think about, particularly when we think about CFAC. It is a finite set of communities, and some of the urbanization issues that we might be faced with also might be a finite set of communities. So if there's any value in aligning those, it might be something to consider also.
Thank you. That's why I was making the joke about Bend has, what do we want to talk about?
Good. That's helpful discussion.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good. Well, moving along, we wanted to draw your attention to attachment C as well, which we've last visited a little while ago now. This is the matrix of Commissioner. These are your ancillary duties, the other committees and activities that you have all signed up for as a liaison or leadership. And so we just wanted to let you know that those are there. I think it's pretty much up to date with the most recent comments and volunteering that we've heard from folks. Vice Chair, I think we have your LOAC appointment on there. Yes, it's reflected. So this is pretty up to date. But of course, as we have some turnover and folks moving around on the commission, this will open up again and we'll need to revisit. So this is just a reference for you. Let us know if you see anything that's incorrect, but we'll be continuing to work with this as roles and responsibilities change over the next several months.
And then, Director, I had a question for the, for example, Commissioner Jacobson's position. Did those roles have to be filled now? Or, I mean, we know, okay. I was like, I think we know who the right person is to be in that spot, but we don't have that person yet, given the role, the coast. I just didn't know if there were some obligations to have somebody's name in there.
For OPAC and the Territorial Sea Plan, those are both liaisons. to
Okay.
those committees. They're not actual members.
Okay. Thank you.
Probably.
Chair?
Vice Chair?
Yeah, I actually couldn't hear Steve. But I do wonder, are there any meetings over the next several months that any of us should attend? Just not as we're not designated for that assignment, but any meetings where they would like to have at least a temporary or an interim liaison with either OPAC or TSP.
Vice Chair Lilac, I'm sorry, I didn't speak into the microphone. I was saying that for the Ocean Policy Advisory Council, the Territorial Sea Plan Advisory, those are liaison roles, so that they're not members of either of those committees. And both of those are staffed by the department. So I think there is a DLCD presence at those. So it's probably not crucial that someone, do that on a temporary basis. I do know that I think I know that the next OPAC meeting is scheduled for September 8th. And they will be deliberating something that might come to you in November. So you'll be kind of current on what they do at their September meeting at your November meeting.
Thank you.
Good.
You gotta retain your stamina, Vice Chair.
I'd just like to point out too that the Oregon Transportation Plan update is now completed and adopted. So we can take that off the list. And I think the Senate Bill 762 work, I'm not sure if we're going to have more to do with that moving forward because now Senate Bill 80's been passed. Do we have any idea?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
So I'm still listed under the wildfire mitigation, the SB 762. I'm not sure if there's going to be continued work from DLCD in that realm.
Commissioner, there are ongoing conversations. As you know, there was much less work around wildfire in this past legislative session than previous. And so our role greatly diminished, but there is still the ongoing work around the development of the map and some of the activities carried over from previous session. I do think we'll probably start to hear more about this as we move into the fall. I know forestry and some of the partners that are working on the technical pieces are reinvigorating their discussions. I would recommend that we just sort of keep it there as needed, but I don't think that there's anyone's waiting on us at this point for any deliverables.
Sorry to go back. I just had this thought. All of a sudden, we were talking about November being somewhere not Portland not Salem. When are we going to have that confirmed? The reason I'm bringing that up is because I'm going to be in LA and I'm going to have to try to get to wherever.
I'd like to know where you should fly.
If I can pull it off, that kind of thing.
Our commission assistant, Jan, is currently working with our regional rep in Southern Oregon to work out logistics, location, and all of those things. So I think we can safely assume we'll be either in Grants Pass or Medford, if that helps your flight plans at all, but we haven't nailed it down anymore.
I'll talk to you later about
specifically
how to get there if you're coming from
fly
Los
to
Angeles.
Medford.
Okay. Thank you.
Um, Commissioner Warren, can you just say another word about the Oregon Transportation Plan having been adopted and being out there yet? I don't think we've had any further information or talked about it in this venue at all. Wondered if you have just a little bit more context you can provide.
Sure. So they, Oregon Department of Transportation just updated the Oregon Transportation Plan, and the Oregon Transportation Commission just adopted, I want to say last week or the week before. So that is in its final version now. It looks like a really great policy document. There was a lot of really hard work put into it and a lot of really great stakeholders that came together to help craft that. And I'm really excited to see what it can do for Oregon moving forward.
In your opinion, was there quite a bit of land use components that would it be worth having some sort of presentation in an upcoming meeting? Or
I absolutely believe that. Yeah, there's a whole section just related to coordinating between land use and transportation. And I think that's something that we can should continue to do better with in Oregon, especially. So it'd probably be worth a presentation to the commission at some point. Get Amanda in here.
Thank you for representing us in that venue. Any further discussion on the dates, locations, or cadence of meetings?
I think we're good.
Good. Well, to wrap up the commission business report, I just wanted to touch lightly on the two advisory committees, or the two committees that are advisory to you. We'll actually be hearing a little bit more about both of them later. And so I won't take much time now. But the Citizens Involvement Advisory Committee has a short section here in the report. We'll be hearing from them next about their ACE awards. So I won't take any news away from them there. But I also wanted to let you know that they have a new work plan that they are very excited about, that they've worked really hard on. And so Sadie will be able to fill in more details there if you'd like more. But I just wanted to let you know that that's now out and available. And the LOAC, Local Officials Advisory Committee, also met yesterday, specifically with regard to providing input on the rulemaking in the housing venue. And so their suggestions, observations, and recommendations will come to you during our housing item later in this meeting. But they've been hard at work and convened by our Deputy Director, if you want to say anything at this point about their meeting yesterday.
Thank you, Chair and Vice Chair Director. This is Kirsten, and it was just exciting to have 6 of the 7 new LOAC members there present for the meeting. We had nearly a full LOAC, missing Commissioner Willis from Marion County. And it was a deep dive into the housing charge and the ONA for them. This commission has been briefed more than the new LOAC members had. So I think we ran a little bit out of time because they had some good questions about how to operationalize it in places from Coos Bay to, Grant County. So lots of kind of questions about how it meets the ground. So I thought that was really healthy. And as Director said, Ethan will bring the kind of summary just points that they made yesterday at the meeting. And I want to thank Vice Chair Lilac for attending that meeting with us. Welcome any other comments, Vice Chair, you might have, but I really appreciate you being there. Thank you.
I don't have anything else to offer. It was great meeting.
Very good. So that is the end of the report on commission business, and you might call on Sadie for a status report. I see many of the speakers for our next agenda item are on the line, and so I just want to make sure we're.
So the next item on the agenda is agenda item 5, which is 2023 Achievement and Community Engagement Awards with Sadie Carney, our policy analyst and communications manager. And it was timed for a later time. So we're asking her now, are we doing it now or are we taking a break? Okay, we're doing it.
Responsive group of panelists. I can't believe it. We were able to turn on a dime. Oh, yeah. Sure. I will speak into the microphone. Sorry.
So welcome, Sadie, for agenda item number 5.
Thank you, Chair Halova. And for commissioners online that could not hear me, I apologize. We are taking this agenda item early, and thank you to our panelists for your flexibility. For the record, Sadie Carney, Communications Manager and Policy Analyst with the Department of Land Conservation and Development. And I believe we have added as a panelist our CIAC Chair, Leah Rausch, and I'll take this opportunity to introduce her and thank her for her time. She will be co-presenting with me this afternoon as we present to you the projects we will recognize with a 2023 Achievement in Community Engagement Award, or ACE Award. So the ACE Awards recognize and expand our understanding of best practices in community engagement across Oregon. These are projects that intentionally engage historically marginalized and underserved communities. And as we collect the applications or receive the applications and then elevate the projects that are being recognized, we provide all of that information on our website, and really it is intended to serve as a resource to other communities and a learning opportunity. And that's really the underpinning and intention of the ACE Awards, is to help broaden and deepen the understanding of community engagement best practices around the state. We did things a little differently in 2023, and we talked about some of this when you approved our CIAC work plan at your January meeting. So we moved our ACE Award application online for the first time, and I think that was really successful. And in creating the online application, we aligned the application questions and the evaluation with our document that we have called Putting the People in Planning. So Putting the People in Planning is a guidance document for local practitioners to help them achieve best practices in community engagement as they do their land use planning work. We also increased our outreach when we announced the awards process and the application process. We use traditional methods, a Gov delivery announcement, a press release. We connected with the Oregon Planners Network over their listserv, but we also did a specific email outreach to community-based organizations. And in total, that really resulted in quite a few phone calls to me from different groups saying, hey, is this the right kind of fit for me? Is this the kind of project you're looking for? And is my project ripe right now, or should I wait until next year? So a good dialogue and really a good chance to let people know about what we're doing and what we're trying to accomplish. The application process was open from the 3rd of April to the 5th of June. In total, we received 9 complete applications. Our wonderful CIAC members reviewed 74 pages of application material prior to their June 30 CIAC meeting, and that is the meeting that we selected the projects to recognize. And I just wanted to note for commission and others that might be listening, some of the themes that we saw in the applications that came in this year. So first, I would note housing and transportation planning, as we are seeing the work of House Bill 2001 from 2019 roll out in communities. There's really a lot of community engagement taking place in the middle housing work. And likewise in transportation work that is happening. And sometimes those are happening in conjunction with one another and kind of like almost like an omnibus, like local code project, if that's a thing. And then I would say we also had 2 different applications, and we were very intentional about asking in our application process about Indigenous populations and Indigenous engagement. And I'm really pleased to report that we actually received a great application from the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation, who updated a transportation plan. And that's the first time we have ever heard from a tribal government in this process. And so that I think is really noteworthy and worth celebrating. Which is related to my final theme, which is the diversity of applicants that we received. We heard from nonprofits, consultants, as I mentioned, a tribal government for the first time, both large and small local governments. In the past, we have heard only from local governments. And so I really think, I have to credit our CIAC members for the work they do in promoting this, our regional representatives for the work they do in promoting this. But really, I think the increased outreach had a great benefit to the ACE Awards overall. So before I turn it over to Leah Rausch, I just want to thank our CIAC members for the time they invest in this work, our applicants for the time and energy that they put into applying, but most of all for the work they are accomplishing at a local level. And to my colleague Ingrid Caudell, who provides amazing support for the CIAC. And I would say all of those groups, our CIAC members, DLCD staff internally, and conversations with applicants are having conversations around how do we continue improving this process? How do we improve our application? How do we improve our evaluation so that we really are getting to the heart of what it means to recognize and celebrate best practices? So with that, I will turn it over to CIAC Chair Leah Rausch.
Yeah, thanks, Sadie. And good afternoon, commissioners. Sadie, thanks for that great introduction and kind of setting up our process and what we saw so far this year. I'll just say this is my 5th year on the CIAC, and this is definitely the kind of strongest set of applications that we've received in that time. So very exciting, as Sadie said. As she shared, our committee really set out to increase the diversity of the types of applications, the types of projects, and the types of organizations that we were receiving applications from. So we heard about a ton of different innovative efforts that are being made to engage with and build trust in communities. So every single project that we saw is really worth celebrating. And in addition to our most outstanding project, we wanted to recognize 2 projects of special significance, one in comprehensive planning and one in community-based design. So the first I'll talk a little bit about, and I see Nicole is here, is the Deschutes County 2040 Comprehensive Plan. So the project sought to involve residents in crafting policies and goals that address rural land issues and provide guidance for future growth and development in the county. Throughout the process, staff worked to reach rural residents where they were, on farms and ranches, in grocery store parking lots, in community halls, fire halls, libraries, in their homes, and online. Staff toured the county holding small-scale meetings in a box, as well as larger open houses. Throughout the project, Deschutes County made intentional efforts to reach priority populations. One piece in their application that I found pretty compelling was the recognition that communities of color in the county are often overwhelmed by requests to participate in government process. And so instead they sought to gather feedback more casually and continue to nurture those relationships. And I think from my perspective, we were really looking for these types of lessons learned that are essential to improving engagement projects and building long-lasting community-based relationships. So congratulations to Nicole and to Deschutes County for their outstanding work. Next, we want to recognize Multnomah County Libraries and Lever Architecture for the Albina and North Portland library renovation projects. In addition to the library, architecture, and historic preservation consultants, engineering firms, arborists, lots of other technical partners, this group engaged more than 30 community organizations in their engagement process, in addition to neighboring community centers, parks, schools, individuals, and neighborhood elders. The goal for this project was to amplify the voices of non-dominant communities and build a more equitable and just design process that truly reflects the whole community. The engagement process collected as many ideas, dreams, wishes, feedback as possible before beginning their design phase in order to gain an understanding of the community's priorities and aspirations and really allow those values to guide their design work from the very beginning. By offering a variety of meeting types and outreach methods, the project team brought in creativity and storytelling increased accessibility, and strengthen the voices of community members at the heart of the Albina and North Portland neighborhoods. Some of the tactics that stood out to me included pop-up interactive events at culturally specific locations, engagement with youth and teens, and incentives to facilitate multi-generational engagement by supporting caretakers and children. I see Tyler is here as well, so congratulations to Lever Architecture, as well as Multnomah County and the City of Portland for their very impressive efforts. Finally, I'm pleased to introduce our most outstanding project of 2023, the American Indian and Alaska Native Engagement Project in Springfield, led by the City of Springfield and Willamette Lane Parks and Recreation District. I'm going to let project staff tell you a lot more about their work and its impact, so I'll just briefly say that the committee was incredibly impressed by this application. It stood out from our other excellent applications in that it really sought to deeply engage and thoughtfully with one community. This engagement effort, which was led by a local Indigenous planning consultant, Stephanie Tabibian, will inform several future projects specific to natural resource planning and protection. The intent of this work was to gather feedback that would directly reflect the perspectives and lived experiences of American Indian and Alaska Native residents who are most directly impacted by the practices of and the services provided by the city in Willamette Lane. So with that, I want to congratulate Willamette Lane and Springfield and hand it over to Monica, Chris, and Christina to talk through their project in a little bit more depth.
Thanks so much, Leah. And before we introduce ourselves, I just really thought it's important to thank the Commission for your time today. Also the CIAC for your time throughout. Hearing the 74 pages is quite impressive of a packet. And really wanted to also thank DLCD staff for their time and help along the way throughout the application process. And then lastly to Stephanie Tabibian, a Shoshone-Paiute resident and Indigenous planner, for without her, none of this would have been possible. So as Leah mentioned, I'm Monica and I work as a comprehensive planner at City of Springfield, and I'll let the Willamette Lane partners introduce themselves.
Sorry. I'm Chris Wright. I'm the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Supervisor at Willamette Lane.
I'm Christina Bowe, and I'm a senior planner at Willamette Lane Park and Recreation District.
And today we thought we would highlight the why behind the work. Sadie and Leah did a really great job explaining what. So we'll highlight the why and then get into some lessons learned, and just really look forward to getting to answer any questions or having a discussion with you as time allows. So I'll just hop right to it. Ask any number of people whose careers touch on community service and planning what motivates them. And we think many would say it's making places we live the best they can be. But as Willamette Lane and the city continued to work on both of our comprehensive planning projects, we realized that maybe the question to ask when thinking about improving places isn't always what do we do with this land and how should it look in the end as a built or sort of static result. To make a place the best it can be means making it work most for people who live there and to help them. And the solutions for that are really different just depending on the context. So in our context, we recognize that we aren't just making plans for land that was once home to a people who once were in the past tense. While we can honor the past, our American Indian and Alaska Native, or AIAN, community members are very much still here today and still call Springfield home. So how Springfield's agencies operate and serve our community members with the deepest ties to where we live, we felt really should reflect that. And when we initially started our projects, we were interested in learning how both could incorporate AIAN input, but the more we learned about how to do that meaningfully and respectfully made our thinking evolve. We had little to no prior experience working in a collaborative way with our AIAN community, who is largely underrepresented. Instead, we first needed to establish trust and develop a mutual understanding of their experiences, perceptions, values, and interests. This meant really not centering the conversation on a project-specific agenda or really technical questions from the outset. And I think being planners, how could we not be future-minded? So our hope is that this dialogue is a spark for something bigger and is just the beginning of a sustained relationship that's really non-transactional and not about when we just need something. this wonderful award really doesn't mean we're done with this work. We want the message to, we really want people to take away a message that we care and that we're listening with commitment in mind, that we really want community members to feel empowered and to know their voices will always matter. We still have much growth, learning, and work to do on our end, but we can share some lessons learned. So I'll turn it over to Chris.
Thank you, Monica. One of the biggest lessons learned is that it is better to try and not be afraid that something isn't going to be perfect. That keeps us from doing a lot of things than to do nothing. And in case you're wondering, we did ask our consultant to suggest how to refer to the Native community in a respectful and accurate way. And her suggestion was American Indian Alaska Native, which is why we're utilizing AIAN in our documentation and conversation.
Another lesson learned that I'll highlight is that we are more effective when we collaborate. So as separate agencies, Springfield and Williamline typically engage a community separately for our own projects. With this project, we started with an interagency training that helped make sure the agencies are on a similar page and that we were really serious about committing to an effort for the long term. And this collaborative training led to the collaborative approach of engagement. And so through this engagement, we can share our resources between agencies and we can maximize the impact of the feedback that was heard and received from our participants.
Another one Leah actually had touched on for Deschutes County, just hearing over and over through feedback that the AIAN community really gets, they're feeling inundated with business as usual requests for project input. So a solution to that through feedback we heard is that more meaningful involvement could include appointing AIAN community members to a leadership or decision-making capacity and helping them feel confident in getting there. So like, do we mentor them or help with scholarships or just time to network? So eventually there's confidence in participating on a commission, board, or committee. Having a seat at the table is really important to them.
We also learned that it's valuable, or there is value in co-planning the event with the community that you're having a dialogue with. So thanks to guidance from Stephanie, our consultant, we left flexibility in the format of our discussion. We also had flexibility in what our desired outcome was for the event. And so keeping that loosely defined helped the community be able to co-plan that event, and they helped co-lead the event, and they also helped co-write the findings from the after the event so that we were all on the same page and felt like the reporting from and the outcome of it was an accurate representation of the dialogue we hosted.
And we learned that we have to be ready to take action on what we hear, and that it's important to have the right players at the table, especially decision makers, to share information widely afterward, and to understand that these are building blocks. We work on small chunks. So even though the information we received once we broke it down was a lot, that if we just tackle it in small chunks, one project or event will lead to another opportunity.
And with that, I think we could go on and on with lots and lots of lessons learned, but we'll kind of, for the sake of time, cut it off there, and we'd be happy to answer any questions or follow up however desired.
Thank you for telling us all these lessons learned. And I have a lot of thoughts based on that, but I want to pass congratulations to you for your most outstanding project, and congratulations to the significant projects also. I didn't know if any of the commissioners had any questions or comments. I don't think I can see that. I don't know. I can see that. Oh, there it is. Okay. Commissioner Lazo.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I didn't want to just chime in, but I just wanted to congratulate all three of the folks that are joining us here this afternoon, and really talk about how important and encouraging it is for us to recognize these efforts. You know, I think this is these three examples serve as real antecedents from what you've heard me say about government community engagement, right? That government often tends to show up and tell us what they're doing rather than show up and ask what they should be doing. And it's really interesting to look at these three projects and see the some features of them that are different in each one, but they also have a common thread that runs through them. You know, there was this sense that for me in these three projects, that each of the projects really respected the context of the community that was impacted by their projects, right? Whether that was existing American Indian communities or the community in North and Northeast Portland, or, you know, in all of Deschutes County, the kinds of folks that live there. And so what really stuck out to me for the three different projects in the Springfield, and I have to say, I'd never heard the jurisdiction Willamette before, but it's like my favorite word of a jurisdiction ever now. I spent some time in Eugene. I'd never heard Willamette before, but I love it. So, but you know, in reading just the summary that Sadie provided, this having local elders from the AN community leading small table discussions, I think was really a nice piece to read, and really encouraging to hear folks engaging folks in that way, right? That it is members of the community that are helping to engage and understand what they want to bring forward. You know, similarly in the Deschutes County piece, the same thing. It was that sense of meeting folks where they were in these different places. We hear about that, you know, really often in different communities, you know, whether it's, you know, going to churches or other things. But so it's so great to see that in that work at the county and the different places that you looked at. And then, you know, Lever, the work that you did, to me, it was just the breadth of community organizations that you went to. I mean, 30 community organizations do that work, again, is a recognition, I think, of the level of importance a place like a community library is to in that particular community. So, you know, congrats to all three of you for the work you're doing and the examples that you're setting for the work that we can do in our community. So thank you all so much.
Thank you. Vice Chair.
Oh, well, thank you. I'll just start by just saying I echo everything Commissioner Lazo just said. It's just I won't repeat all of it. The congratulations to the three award winners. This is just an exceptional project. It's so inspiring to see the great work that's happening and then to learn from it. And the lessons learned are just the most valuable piece of all. And I really want to extend my sincere and genuine thanks to all of the applicants. When you apply for these awards, you're applying because you care about your work, about your community, about making positive change, everything we've talked about. And not everybody won the award, but everybody spent a lot of time both in their work, in their communities, and on the grant or not the grant, but on the award application. And that really demonstrates your commitment to everybody. So, and clearly, I think the city of Eugene won last year or the year before. So clearly, there's some great work happening in the Southern Willamette Valley. So great work. Kudos to all of you. And of course, I have to just say I'm so proud of Deschutes County and my colleagues here that I can almost see Nicole across the street if I look from one to the next. So with that, again, great work. Thanks everybody. And what a great way to end our day today. Not that I'm the last one to speak, but really, really nice to celebrate all of you.
Commissioner Warren.
Yeah, congratulations to all the applicants and awardees. Really fantastic work. And I'd also like to say a huge thank you to both Sadie and Leah. We're so lucky to have you two, and you doing the work you're doing is really, really important to all of us. And so I just want to give you huge props because none of this would happen without you pouring your heart and soul into it too. And just really appreciate that.
Thank you.
And I wanted to end with, and I'm sure there's other comments that I think I felt overwhelmed when I first started speaking. I was like, let the other commissioners talk. Partly because I always think back to Tigard when we were in Tigard that time, and we had the CIAC came and talked to us about these are the best practices and this is what Oregon's going to be moving toward, right? And it was like, yes, let's do that. And then it's like this many years later, we have people coming in who've fully done that on their own, you know, and are getting awards for it. And in such a short time, I don't want to say a lot of changes happened, but I feel a lot of changes happened in the way that we think about community. And I feel like this has been a long time coming. And I know from people who are on the ground that there's been a lot of staff members at various either organizations or governments or whatever it is that have wanted to do this kind of work and just haven't been empowered by their leadership or their commissions or the powers that be that are like, yes, we're going to give you the resources, time to do that. And I especially like the most outstanding project because you could imagine a harder case in the past saying there's no outcome, there's no project that this is tied to, and really putting focus on relationship building, which then will make every outcome and every process better in the future. But it takes leadership to kind of condone or support that. And so I just wanted to kind of understand that there's other people not in the room that have decided to let people spend time and resources on this. So really excited about that. So congratulations. And then I was going to say I was a participant in one of these winners, which I was like, oh, wow, what? I was a community member in the North Portland Library one, because it's walking distance from my house and it's where I vote and it's where my kids get books. And so I just wanted to note that I took my kids with me, and they made models of what they thought the library should look like and what they liked and didn't like. And so, even having that process and then driving by the building, and now it has a fence around it, it's going under construction, they can be like, oh, remember when you gave some input for that? And now this is what they're going to do. And I think all the projects, or at least 2 of the 3, had a focus on youth engagement. I think that's really important for the next generation. So that was a surprise to me that I was a community member on one of these. So congratulations to all the winners. And I didn't know if director or deputy director yet any more, but congratulations to Sadie on your work also to make this, and the CIC committee, which is even had its own rebirth in some ways with, new ways of thinking about membership and new people coming on. So this is kind of a larger picture that now this is sort of a celebration of the rollout of a larger picture. So thank you.
Thank you, Chair Holova. I think you are hearkening back to, the CIAC panel, and just like noting that sort of like growth and swell and forward movement over time. And I think we really see it. I think we see it, at the leadership level at the state. We see it at the leadership level at the department, and we see it among you as leaders, and we see it at the local level as well. And it's so encouraging and inspiring that I am just so honored to do this work. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And I didn't say one of the most exciting parts you said was the different type of applicants that are applying. I think that's really important. The idea of a county, a city, any regional bodies, but also an architecture firm and a library system, so I feel like this will grow for next year.
Yeah. It's I hope our CIAC members buckle up. It's going to be a big packet.
Thank you. So with that, trying to see, I think that that's our last agenda item for the day. So that concludes our meeting for today. We will recess the meeting until tomorrow at 7:30 a.m. Where we're going to begin item number 6, which is our Fair Housing Council bus tour, which is going to be led by Commissioner Lazo. And I'm kind of excited because this is like my, area. And then I heard the list of things. I said, wow, I'm going to learn a lot on this bus tour. And so after the tour, we're going to be engaging in item number 7, which is the post-lunch discussion. That item is open to the public, but it's not going to be live streamed. So for anybody listening, our actual live stream tomorrow is going to start at 2:15 p.m. with item number 8, which is the employment tables rulemaking. So thank you, everyone who's attended both in person and virtually, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow if you're coming in person or live streaming at 2:15.
Jan, can you remind us when and where we're to report in the morning if we'd like to be on the bus? If we're to be on the bus.
We will be meeting at the Portland 1900 building at 7:30, and the bus will leave promptly at 8 a.m. So if we can all meet in the front of the building, I'll be standing there probably starting at 7:20 for those of you who like to arrive early. But the bus will leave at 8, so we'll have a little bit of time.
Deputy Director.
Director and Jan Pauley. Should we bring our own, is it a BYO coffee situation or is there coffee on site? It's just thinking 7:30 a.m. We have an evening meeting yet to go here tonight, so
Bring your own coffee.
BYO coffee. Okay, good to know. Thank you so much for that important detail.
Spella Coffee Roasters right over here. Very good. Very good.
Thank you.
So with that, our meeting is adjourned.